Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Got Power of the Onmyoji in Jujutsu Kaisen World Movie. Before we start, please go support Dragneel Slayer for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken characters' gender, but of course Naruto is a male. A world filled with supernatural beings. Sorcerers who fight them. Uzumaki Naruto, just another teenager, discovers after his mother's death that not everything is as it seems. As time passes, his past and present overlap, and he discovers that he is the last of the Onmyoji lineage in the world. The lineage carried by misfortune. 1. Uzumaki Naruto. Smiles represented people. They represented their feelings, their thoughts, what they would do or what they could do, even when their posture indicated nothing else. Smiles were always present on every person. There were formal ones, light ones, happy ones, sad ones, fake ones, each one a complete representation of what a person might be feeling. When someone saw another person smile, they had to study what the smile represented. This could give the other person a clue so they could help them, so they could save them from their suffering. Many people, many children, hid their suffering in a hard smile that no one would erase and to which adults would not give much importance. They would ignore the children's smiles and would only see them as happy smiles, even if they were hiding great pain. Trump. He clenched his hands. Bowing his head, he looked down at the ground, his eyes brimming with tears. They were already falling down his cheeks, dripping to the ground like raindrops, disappearing within seconds. In his mind, present like a constant glow, his father's smile was clearly present, as if he were seeing it right in front of him, no matter where he looked. Because 2 hours. He'd been sitting there for 2 hours, on a white stone bench, staring down at his white sneakers-clad feet as the hospital's patients, nurses, and doctors passed by. Just 2 hours ago, his mother had finally surrendered her life to the god of death. Finally, after years of agony, she'd come to her final rest, letting out a final sigh, leaving him a few last words and a letter that lay to his left, tucked into a huge envelope bearing the family seal, that reddish swirl that swirled from left to right, like the hands of a clock. He didn't have the strength to read it. His mind wasn't well enough to deal with his mother's final words either. He didn't know what was in that letter, and he doubted he could handle it so soon. The memory was fresh. He could see her there, lying in bed, covered by a thin white sheet, her hands crossed over her chest, her eyes closed. He even remembered how the nurses came in and covered his mother's face with the same sheet. Because his stomach was growling. He could hear it. Bile was rising in his throat. He wasn't sure if he could stay whole again. He felt his heart pounding, hammering against his chest. He began to gasp for air. His lungs seemed to shrink, or so he felt. Frush. She opened her eyes when she was finally able to sigh. She was sweating. Thick sticky drops trickled down her face, falling alongside her tears onto the floor. She was breathing heavily, as if the air had been stolen from her, and her chest seemed to tighten with each breath. Because if you keep holding your breath, you could have a heart attack or faint. I can even hear your heart pounding. But that voice filling his left ear, he opened his mouth completely. Yes, he had been holding his breath completely. When the stranger pointed this out, he was able to focus again on breathing like a normal person. Breathing again, he could feel his head stop pounding and his heart begin to pump at a normal rate. Swallowing, he moved his head slightly to the left towards the place where that calm, quiet voice had come from, which certainly seemed a little familiar to him. Oh, oh. A tall, lanky man greeted him. He was probably around 6 feet tall, if not taller, with a few inches added, thanks to his spiky hair, which made him resemble a plant. It was white, in a hairstyle that completely defied all laws of gravity. With a blindfold covering his eyes, his face was limited to only his chin, mouth, and the thin nose that was embedded in that thin, slightly pointed face. Who are you? Without answering, letting the question pass, the man moved with ease and grace, like a dancer, to sit on the bench the young man was occupying. He didn't speak. He kept his hands tucked into those dark trousers and crossed his right leg over his left. He remained silent. His eyes narrowed as he looked at them. He was calm, completely still. Even his chest barely seemed to move, or his nose itself, which made no sound with each breath the man took. Who was he? Strange as it seemed, he knew him in a way. Or rather, his mind told him he knew him. He'd even had that feeling constantly since he'd arrived, feeling like he'd seen the man somewhere, but not remembering him anywhere specifically. If you don't close your mouth, flies will get in, the man said with a slight smile. Embarrassed by those words, the young man looked away and closed his mouth, wiping away the light drool that had dripped down his chin as he held it open for a few seconds with the back of his hand. Had he really been left with his mouth slightly open while staring at him? He hadn't realized it, and it was becoming incredibly embarrassing for himself. Nothing like this had ever happened to him before. Maybe when he saw a girl from his school, but not much more. Ma, you shouldn't worry. It's encouraging to have fans like you, with that open mouth and saliva and everything." The boy pressed his lips together. Soon, he felt his cheeks heat up and he interlaced his fingers, keeping his eyes on them, on their intertwined hands. This was proving too embarrassing for him and he doubted he'd forget it anytime soon. Even in the distant future, it was hard to forget that moment with that man. But it wasn't a moment as such. It was just an embarrassing moment, one that wasn't advisable, and one he would try not to repeat in the future. But he had already remembered it at 14. Sighing, he proceeded to look at the man again. "So who are you?" The man didn't answer. In fact, calmly, as if he hadn't been asked, he took a phone out of his pocket and pointed it directly at her. He squinted when the flash hit his retinas and blinked several times to erase the light. "Understand? You've grown a lot. You still look a bit like your father, with those blue eyes and golden hair." When he tried to move, the man's hand stopped him completely. He felt the man's fingers tangled in his hair. "Kushina has raised you well." He blinked. He watched as the man's lips twisted and he smiled softly, affectionately, warmly, but after a few seconds, he let go of that hand and leaned back, watching as the man's fingers clenched and unclenched slightly, as if he were reaching for something and couldn't find it. "Ara." He finally closed his hand and took a second photograph. The boy blinked again, backing away a little more. Yes, you really do have your mother's round face and your father's messy golden hair. Those eyes really do look like your father's. A little lighter, almost like the sky. But they still look like sapphires. Did you know my father?" She watched as the man put the phone back in his pocket. He'd also taken the letter, for which she was grateful. She expected the stranger to have ended up sitting on that envelope, crumpling it and the contents, which would then perhaps affect the lettering itself. Let's say so," the man murmured, taking his chin in his opposite hand. "I met your mother at our school. I met your mother too. Very beautiful, with hair made of threads of destiny." With those words, the young man felt his heart race. He could feel the feelings in them, how real and intense they were, and how they entered his heart. A good man. Too smart, willing to make changes and improve the world. It was a shame what happened to him, as well as to your mother recently. He can't come here like I would have liked. Who are you, then? Satoru. Gojo Satoru, he introduced himself, flashing a wide smile, slightly moving his blindfold and revealing an eye as blue as the sky itself. Nice to meet you, Naruto-kun. Naru-chan. Remember, if anything ever happens to me, find your godfather. His name is Gojo Satoru. You've met him before, remember? If you haven't, look at this. He moved his hand to his sweepant's pocket, taking something out. Pulling it out, he finally pulled out a photograph of 3 people. His mother, his father, and the man sitting next to him, wearing much more casual clothes and wearing sunglasses instead of a thick blindfold. It is. Ah. What memories with that photograph. Satoru took the photograph from the boy's hand and looked at it, although no one could really tell if he was actually looking at it or not. It was when we finally graduated from the academy. Or a day before. Here Jito had left and Minato was still a little upset because of his friction. Edo. Jito Suguru, Satoru's voice hardened slightly. Sighing, the man handed the photograph back to him. He's a classmate. No, a former classmate who went to school with us. We don't have much of a relationship now and your father and he ended up on completely opposite sides. Even your mother was forced to distance herself from him even though they were actually close. Blinking, the boy looked at the photograph again. Was that man Gojo Satoru, his godfather? In a way, it was comforting to see that he wasn't totally alone in the world. He thought he'd end up in some orphanage or in the custody of some government institution. And he didn't want that to happen. He would have preferred to die by his mother's side. So what will happen to me? But that simple question, Satoru blinked behind the blindfold. The man looked at the boy and saw that face filled with sadness and uncertainty. Hadn't Kushina told him about sorcerers? Hadn't she told him about curses? It seemed that both Minato and Kushina had wanted to keep their son away from the world of sorcery. Now, he had to bear the burden of his training and his life. Not that he cared too much. He was his godson and as such he had to take care of the boy. That had also been a promise to Kushina. You'll come with me. My house is huge, maybe too big for my taste. There you can finish your last year of high school and then I'll enroll you in a special academy. If you accept, we could meet with the director tomorrow, the man explained in a calm voice, keeping an eye on what his godson would do. I have no choice. You want me to be honest? There won't be much room for you to act alone. He held up a finger, moving it in a circle. Old people are annoying and they'll definitely take you if you're completely alone. Too clever and annoying when they want to be. Old people. Blinking, he saw Gojo Satoru let out an amused light laugh, as if he'd just told a joke. Without giving it much thought, he pushed it to the back of his mind. You'll have to change houses and schools. I don't exactly live in Hokkaido, the man explained, a smile spreading across his face, both pleasant and genuine. You'll come to Tokyo. Tokyo. You'll see a big city. There are vending machines at school and everything. He blinked exactly 7 times. In front of him, Gojo Satoru was waving his hand in greeting, his smile growing on his face almost amused to say the least. He let out a sigh. I don't have much to do. Without my mother, I don't have to stay in Hokkaido. I also don't have anything that terrifies me, he murmured, breaking off slightly as he remembered his mother lying in bed again. It would be an image he wouldn't be able to forget anytime soon, and one he would take with him to the grave. Perfect. Standing up, Satoru revealed a bag hanging from his left arm. From what he could read in the kanji on it, he understood that it was a bag from a local bun shop. We have a flight in the afternoon. Do you mind if I took it early? No. Great. Taking him, Satoru pulled him towards him in a small hug that the boy found comforting. If you need to cry, do it. If you need to scream, do it. Now I'm here for you, Naruto-kun. I'll be there as a pillar for you to grow from here. Please, count on me always. And, without further ado, feeling his body begin to burn, he cried freely. Uzumaki Naruto screamed in pain. Fushiguro Tsumiki. With a critical eye, he observed that house of exorbitant dimensions, although house wasn't the exact definition for that building. Rather, it was an old-fashioned Japanese-style mansion, with yellowish paper shoji doors and wooden frames, with cherry trees planted at the ends of that enormous front garden, which presumably implied that there was a backyard behind that enormous house that could, house 100 people or even more if he wasn't mistaken. Letting out a sigh, he now looked at his new legal guardian. Gojo Satoru. That man had turned out to be his godfather, although it was the first time he had seen him and had engaged in conversation with him, something strange, since his voice was a distant echo in his memories and he couldn't place it in an exact line, but with a closeness to his parents that now made sense to him. Both they and that man with the extravagant hairstyle had gone to the same school for 4 years, only to go their separate ways and reunite for his birth, which was certainly strange in that story, but he wouldn't look for the 3 feet on the cat. Pulling the strap of the bag where he kept his few belongings, he followed his tutor into the main house. A large foyer greeted him as he crossed the threshold, and he was completely amazed, taking in the classic decor of the house, the ornaments straight out of a samurai movie, and the small bonsai trees that adorned every room within his sight. She moved her eyes as she walked. She had taken off her shoes at the entrance, or rather, an old woman had forced her to take them off, so now she felt the cold wooden floor beneath her bare feet as she walked behind Satoru. Gojo Satoru. He was a strange, eccentric man, his eyes always covered by a dark bandage that kept everything hidden. Was it to protect his eyes? Was it because he was blind? If so, how did he know he was the son of his old friend? The boy narrowed his eyes and lowered his eyebrows, wrinkling his face slightly. And this is your room. He stopped 2 meters away from Satoru. He looked toward where the man was pointing with a long pale finger. A medium-sized, undecorated room, probably once used as a guest room. It looked somewhat cozy, if he were honest. Good. Without further ado, he cautiously entered the room. He dropped his backpack off his shoulder, making a small, muffled sound that disappeared seconds later as he inspected what would become his room. There wasn't much. A closet, a desk at the end of it next to a chair with a plant on the table that he identified as another bonsai. It seemed that Saturo or someone from the service was particularly interested in bonsai because there were no other plants besides the cherry trees. I'll be back for dinner in 2 hours, the man said in a calm, below-average voice. In the meantime, make yourself comfortable. He didn't respond to those words, he only heard Gojo Satoru's feet disappear down the hallway they had used to get there, and he was finally alone. Alone. It was a word that now made him feel cold, in a harsh reality. He was left completely alone. He'd never met his father, and his mother had finally died after a long period of bed rest, leaving him in the care of a strange man who didn't know if he was blind or simply a hopeless idiot. Carefully, she bent her legs and assumed a lotus position, standing right in the middle of the room. She picked up her discarded backpack and, with a tug at its edges, opened it to reveal its contents. A small change of clothes and several photographs. The rest of her things would arrive the next day with the moving crew. The boy carefully took out the photograph. His face softened when he saw his mother's face adored with a huge smile. She was Uzumaki Kushina, the best mother in the world to him, the one who had helped him for as long as he could remember. And now he wasn't there. Because. His treacherous eyes soon filled with tears. A curtain quickly covered his vision, and he was forced to rub his face with his right arm, creating friction that ended up slightly warming his face. It still hurt. It would always hurt. His mother's death would be present in his life, would stay with him for the rest of his life, and wouldn't leave him until he himself left the world of the living. It was something he knew and was prepared for, so he thought. The memories were stirring his tears. The tears were tearing him apart. Why? Why? Gojo Satoru had told him he could cry, that he could break down and open up completely. He'd done it with him in the hospital when he'd hugged him, and he was doing it now in that room, completely alone, with no one to. Sorry. Soft, sweet, a feminine voice reached his ears, making his eardrums jingle like bells welcoming him into a store. Opening his eyes, he turned his head to observe the owner of that voice. She was a girl with brown hair that reached just below her shoulders, a slender body covered by the fine fabrics that made up her casual clothes, and enormous brown eyes that seemed to be filled with life in the form of an intense glow. Are you okay? He realized then that he must look completely ridiculous. He, a man, was weeping openly and was probably showing swollen eyes, red with tears, and a face drawn with pain. Without saying a word, he began to clean his face. He didn't want to leave marks, a reminder of his own pain that the girl could use against him. Yes, I'm fine, he replied calmly, trying to make his voice sound firm. But his voice betrayed him. While his words should have sounded firm and calm, they actually sounded broken, empty, and wavering. So much so that he could only close his mouth when those 3 words left his mouth, promising himself not to say anything again for a few minutes, at least until his heart and body calmed down. You don't seem well. He looked at the girl. He hadn't really taken his eyes off her. His response was completely muted when arms wrapped around him, and for the second time he was swept into an involuntary embrace. She smells like spring. He didn't know exactly what spring smelled like, but he was sure it had to be like that girl's. Delicate, full of floral fragrances and greenery. It was a rich scent that was slowly becoming etched in his mind. When he went to answer, she quickly turned away from him. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The girl began to move her hands rapidly in front of her face, as if she were doing some kind of mime act. The boy soon burst into laughter, stopping her completely, even with her hands raised. Seeing that he was laughing, she twisted her lips into a smile that, in his eyes, was sweet, sincere, and priceless. That was fun. Wiping away a treacherous tear, one of laughter, he remained seated. He could smell the spring scent of the girl beside him, just inches away. Why had that girl hugged him? He understood why Gojo had done it, since they were connected to each other, but he didn't have a relationship with that teenager, did he? I'm sorry, the girl apologized for the 3rd time. Now, a smile graced her face, like a remnant of the laughter that had escaped them both. I bothered you while you were crying. I intruded on your own pain and didn't know. It's okay, he raised his hand, stopping the sentence he was about to finish. With his other hand, he had taken the photograph he'd taken out of his backpack. Gojo-san told me I could cry if I wanted to cry. However, I didn't know anyone other than that old woman lived with this eccentric guy. Gojo-kun has always been eccentric. I'm surprised he's not here with you, doing some of his silly things. My brother usually stays away from him when he's like this. Do you have a brother? Suddenly interested, he asked something too obvious even for him. Realizing this, he simply closed his mouth a little tightly. The girl just let out a snort that tried to hide a laugh. Yes, a younger brother. We're not blood relatives, but our parents married and we soon became siblings. Some time later, Gojo-kun appeared to take care of Megumi, my brother. But he also took care of me. The girl took a hand in one of the locks of hair that framed her face. She didn't understand why she was saying that, but the words came out on their own, unable to stop them. You could say that, for years, Gojo-kun has been like our father and mother. Although my brother doesn't want to admit it. He's a bit unsociable, like an annoying cat. He remained silent as the girl spoke about Megumi, his brother. For him, having a brother or sister had been an impossible dream. His father disappeared when he was born. Years later, 14 to be exact, his mother left the world with a sigh as her last wish, and she was never with another man or woman. He didn't know if it was because of him or herself, or perhaps because of her health. His illness began when he turned 10, on October 10th. After that, things only got worse until his mother ended up bedridden, unable to move, and spent the rest of her life in the same hospital he attended every day. He didn't miss a single day. Are you another boy like us? That question brought him out of his thoughts. He blinked for a full 7 seconds and then just let his breath escape through his teeth. Well, you could say that, he admitted, letting the words trail off. Gojo took custody of me 2 days ago. When my mom died, he just showed up at the hospital and said he was my godfather. I didn't know I had one or that my mom had any acquaintances outside of our small circle until he arrived the other day. The girl remained silent while the young man told his own story, or at least his most recent one. From his words, she deduced that his mother had been ill for a long time. She could sense it in his tone, in the way he moved his eyes, and in the way he clutched the photograph he had taken on the floor when she hugged him. She also deduced that Gojo had kept his distance from the boy and his mother because of his current job. Although if the woman had met him, she was sure she was part of that job as well. Had she distanced herself from everything around her, and that's why Gojo kept his distance. Gojo-kun is also very careless. He always thinks lightly and not about the consequences or suffering, as if he could take it all on his own shoulders. She tilted her head and smiled. The boy felt his cheeks heat up at the sight. But he's a good guy. He took care of us when he shouldn't have. She reached for something on her neck. The blonde man watched as the girl took out a small pendant and delicately opened it, as if it weren't made of silver, but of marble, and she didn't want to break it. From his position he couldn't see much, but when the girl moved, his right eye caught an image of 4 people. 2 adults and 2 children. He swallowed hard. The man in that image looked familiar. Short black hair, a scar on the right side of his face, right over his mouth. Hard eyes that seemed carved from the hardest stone. A muscular body covered by a tight black t-shirt. Although he couldn't remember how he knew Gojo Satoru's voice, he could remember that man perfectly. As if he had it right before his eyes, the man had taken corporeal form, escaping from his mind, standing right behind the girl in front of him. My mother married Megumi's father. Soon, they both disappeared and we were forced to grow up alone. But not for long. The girl closed the pendant and squeezed it in her hands. I hope you're both okay wherever you are. He understood that the girl could sense what had really happened. Although Gojo didn't say so, even he knew that both of their parents were currently dead. Why are you telling me this? He asked. You don't know me. You don't even know my name or my. Fushiguro Tsumiki, the girl interrupted, flashing a smile. I told you my story so you could forget your pain. Tsumiki looked down at the pendant in her hands. It's not something I regret telling or that I do with every stranger. But Gojo-kun took you into his home and the plane told me you needed something to help you accept your own loss. It's not easy, but I wanted you to know my story so you could come to terms with yours. He threw his head back. He felt the hair falling over his forehead, brushing his eyebrows and eyelids. Are there such pure people? He let out a sigh. Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. Unplacer connoisseur, Tsumiki-chan. Tsumiki smiled and Naruto felt the urge to do the same. Slowly, a bond began to form. 3. A strange family. Stunned, he stopped in front of a huge painting that took up an entire wall of the hallway. There wasn't much drawn in it. Even what was there wasn't anything completely exceptional or something striking and rarely seen. The only thing the painting he was looking at depicted were 2 people. One of them was a beautiful woman with raven black hair stirred by the wind, represented by soft white lines. In the Caesar position, the woman had a sad, melancholic, and downcast face. Even though it was a painting, the woman represented it as if it were a completely real emotion, as if she were real. Dressed in a simple purple kimono with a cherry blossom print, the woman held both hands in her lap, her eyes closed, resting on her own hands. But between those porcelain-colored hands, another was being held. That hand was connected to a thick arm, the muscle lines defined by precise, confident dark brushstrokes. This arm ran to join the body of the second figure it represented. This one, unlike the first, depicted a man with somewhat dark tanned skin and black hair tied in a high bun. Unlike the woman, who wore fine, expensive clothes, the man wore a tattered dirty kimono, patched in several places, as if it had been torn countless times. The man's face, contrasting with the woman's in the Caesar position, displayed joy. The fine lines that outlined that face gave it a light smile, drawn with perfect precision. He hadn't missed a beat and, like the woman, that emotion seemed to make the man in the painting real. Just 2 figures in a painting. That had completely caught his attention, and that's why he stopped in his tracks as he toured the Gojo house, which now belonged to Saturo through his family inheritance. I didn't even know why it actually stopped. The beautiful lady in the painting represents the sadness of the mother, while the ragged man represents the energy and carefree happiness of the son. Tsumiki's face filled his peripheral vision, and he quickly realized he'd entered her personal space, so he quickly stepped aside. The girl only laughed softly. How do you know? Gojo-kun explained it to me the first time I saw it. I didn't understand at the time because I was a child. The girl's face twitched, and the young man noticed that she seemed to be remembering something. Young people are always carefree. They don't look around. They don't even notice what they're wearing. But even so, they're the ones who enjoy and suffer the most in equal measure in life, that's why their mothers are always sad. That's what Gojo-kun told me about the painting. It doesn't make much sense, it doesn't even have a real backstory. The boy looked at the painting again. One detail he had missed was the brushstrokes that shaped those faces. Just as the artist managed to perfectly recreate emotions, he did the same with the faces of both, giving the woman her appropriate age and the man his own. The woman had light dark touches that denoted the wrinkles in her skin. The man, on the other hand, had light shiny touches that showed the youthfulness of his body, a contrast to the woman who kept him company. I still don't understand it. Don't try too hard, Uzumaki-kun. I've been searching for the meaning of Gojo-kun's words and the painting itself for years. Even today, I haven't found a single clue to understand the painting and Gojo Satura's words. Tsumiki clasped her hands behind her back. Naruto glanced at her. Her face was smooth, fair-skinned, and bright in the dim light. It's a little frustrating. But I treated it as a game. Tsumiki closed her eyes slightly and smiled at the boy's slight expression of confusion. He didn't do much to hide his confusion, and upon seeing the girl's expression, he simply looked away and coughed to get rid of his slight blush. He didn't want her to look at him much longer. Fushiguro Tsumiki really was cute, or so he thought when he saw her smile every few seconds. Had she ever cried? But he didn't want to see her cry or wonder. If she did, he'd probably imagine it soon afterward and wouldn't be able to fall asleep thinking about how Tsumiki cried. Eyes. The man's laughing voice brought both teenagers out of their own thoughts. Tsumiki opened her eyes and turned her body. Naruto pushed the images of the girl to the back of his mind and focused his eyes on the person who had spoken to them. Gojo-kun. The silver-haired blindfolded man stood pressed against the wall, sticking his upper body out over the edge and moving his right hand in a circular gesture, as if forming a hoop. I'm so glad you're getting along. Have you cried enough, Naruto-kun? She asked with a smile on her face. Showing how her face was reddening, she looked away while crossing her arms over her chest, taking a completely indignant stance at Gojo's comment. Aha. You've cried. He didn't acknowledge it. He didn't mention crying in Tsumiki's arms after barely knowing her for 2 minutes, and he wouldn't mention it in front of that strange, eccentric man. Eccentric because his hands seemed to be moving in a strange way as he looked at them. Although, was he really looking at him? He was curious to see what Gojo Satoru's face looked like without that blindfold on his eyes. You've cried. You've cried. Gojo pointed at him. The boy grimaced, his blush deepening as he tried to duck his head. Of course he'd been crying. Why else were his eyes red? Even now, tears were starting to gather in his eyes. Did that man have no tact at all? Do it. Tsumiki stood in front of the white-haired man. Naruto looked at her and opened his eyes. With a bump on his head and tears miraculously spilling from his bandage, Gojo Satoru remained scared and in pain. Behave yourself, Gojo-kun. Uzumaki-kun hasn't been here long and he's lost someone important to him. Stop being annoying. Tsumiki began scolding the man, doing the opposite. Gojo looked like a child and Tsumiki had taken the adult role in the conversation. Besides, weren't you with Megumi? Have you left him alone again? He's grown up now. He'll be able to handle anything. Satoru had regained his composure. The boy magically disappeared from his head and he pointed at Tsumiki with a peace sign. The boy, for his part, remained silent and watched the interaction. Was Gojo the adult? Or was Tsumiki? Hahaha. Satoru jerked his head to the right. Tsumiki turned her body and, still pointing at the man, stared at the boy with wide eyes. Soon after, both the adult and the teenager laughed lightly at Naruto's laughter. Wiping a tear from his face, Naruto let out a sigh. Thank you. Ah. Satoru looked at the boy in bewilderment. For her part, Tsumiki punched the adult directly in the stomach and stopped him from saying anything, forcing the man to clutch his stomach. Uzumaki-kun. No need to thank me. Tsumiki opened her eyes. Involuntarily, the boy rushed toward her and hugged her tightly. She felt those arms squeezing her and she couldn't contain the blush that dusted her cheeks. She couldn't say anything either. The boy pulled away and took her by the shoulders. Thank you, Tsumiki. Unable to contain her facial muscles, the girl allowed her lips to twitch. Slightly, her lips moved and a smile spread across her face, forming a beautiful smile. You're welcome, Yuzu. Call me Naruto. Naruto. Tsumiki nodded once. Naruto-kun. The two young men remained in that position. He kept his hands on the girl's shoulders, standing about 2 steps away from her. She maintained her warm smile, showing an imperceptible blush on her cheeks. Is this young love? Or summer love? The blush grew on both young men. Under Satoru's intense gaze, the two separated and turned their backs to each other. The man sighed and laughed inwardly. Ma. He grabbed the boy by the left shoulder and the girl by the right. He forcefully pulled them both out of the room. We've already left Megumi-kun alone for too long. And his emo mood when he's alone can cause trouble. Plus, he'll get into fights with people. Did he fight again? The girl looked directly at the man. A small drop of sweat trickled down Satoru's cheek. Megumi. For some strange reason, the boy felt sorry for Fushiguro Megumi, Tsumiki's brother. Would she hit him? She had done it to Satoru, the man who had taken the 3 of them in. Surely she would be much less permissive with his brother and would hit him to get him to focus. They were siblings, after all. The boy opened his eyes when they stepped out into the backyard of that enormous mansion. It was larger than the front yard and even larger than the old house. Fresh green grass stirred in the light gusts of wind, creating a beautiful spring sound. She blinked once and detected movement to her right. A young man with black hair was walking toward them in a dark tracksuit. He had his hands in his pants pockets and was accompanied by two dogs, one white and one black. "Sister? Gojo-sensei?" "Sensei?" Surprised by the epithet, Naruto looked at the white-haired man with his eyes closed. "Are you a master of something?" "Yes." Saturo raised both hands. Waving two fingers in front of the blonde, he flashed two peace signs. "And I'm a cool teacher. Right, Megumi-kun?" He looked at Tsumiki's brother. Like him, he was tall, with a thin build and messy, slightly tousled black hair, his green eyes flickering between Saturo and him. Let me introduce you." Naruto felt himself being moved and was right in front of Megumi. "This is Uzumaki Naruto-kun. I hope you get along, Megumi-kun." The black-haired youth pushed the white-haired man away from them with his hand. Saturo had inserted his face between the two teenagers, giving off that cheerful smile. Yes. Whatever you say, Gojo-sensei," the young man replied dismissively. When he got rid of the man, he looked at the Uzumaki with narrowed eyes. The boy felt like he was being analyzed by the younger man. "A pleasure. Fushiguro Megumi." The boy extended his hand toward Naruto in greeting. The blonde accepted the hand by shaking his own and squeezing it. For seconds, the two boys maintained that grip and stared directly into each other's eyes. Megumi felt something strange about the boy and, in turn, Naruto was feeling something strange about Megumi. "Nice dogs. What are their names?" Fushiguro opened his eyes slightly. This gesture was copied by his sister, who looked directly at the only adult there. Saturo showed no emotion beyond the smile already plastered on his lips. "Oh right. I'll tell Megumi-kun he needs to take them out more or they'll get stressed. With those furs, they look like a representation of yin-yang." The man put his arms around both boys' shoulders, forcing the teenagers to release their grip. "So, what are we having for dinner today? Today is a special day and we should support Naruto-kun." Megumi looked at her sister. She watched as she lowered her head and brought her right hand to the pendant around her neck. When her fingers closed around the amulet, she realized the blonde had lost one of his parents, the only one he ever lived with. "Pizza?" Without taking her eyes off her sister, Megumi answered Satoru's question clearly. "I want pizza. But barbecue. I don't want any more of your inventions." She jabbed her finger into the adult's nose. "Last time I spent 7 days in the bathroom. I almost died of dehydration." "Hahaha. That was a good day. Right, Tsumiki-chan?" Satoru bared his teeth in a huge grin. The girl smiled, moving her lips slightly. "Yes, it was very fun." Separating from Satoru, Megumi walked towards the house accompanied by his two dogs, so the blonde-haired boy was imprisoned by the arms of Fushiguro's teacher. "I'm going to take a shower." He stopped right in front of the door. "And don't even think about coming in, Satoru. I'll hit you this time." But that warning, the boy disappeared from view. Tsumiki smiled and shook her head. Satoru simply sighed and scratched his hair with his hand. The blonde boy looked at this in confusion, as if he were forming an exclamation point in his head. That group of people was too strange. 4. Human shield. Leaning against the wall next to the school's entrance, the young man with messy blonde hair displayed a completely calm face, letting the wind gently sway the golden strands of his unkempt hair. Thanks to Gojo Satoru, he had changed a bit of his old clothes in those days, now wearing blue jeans, white sneakers, and a white t-shirt with a red swirl on the chest. Over the same t-shirt, he wore a black hoodie with orange trim. He always loved that range of colors together, just as his father loved the crimson red that his hair was a part of. Maybe his father loved or loved yellow, but it wasn't something he would discover in the near or distant future. He didn't even know his father. Closing his hand around a yellow ball, he tossed it up and caught it again. 3 days had passed since his mother's death, her burial, and the farewell he had with her. 3 days since he arrived at his godfather's house, the man who introduced himself as Gojo Satoru and showed him a photograph of himself with his parents. 3 days since he met Fushiguro Tsumiki and his younger half-brother, Fushiguro Megumi, both with completely different and contrasting personalities, but who loved each other. Although Megumi never let it show, at least not in front of him. He caught the ball with his hand and looked to the side. The students at that high school were starting to leave, and with that, his 15-minute wait would come to an end. Like every day of those 3 short days, he had gone to pick up the Fushiguro brothers from the high school where they attended, finding that only Tsumiki seemed to have agreed to let him go for them, while Megumi had decided to return alone. Although this decision to go for the brothers was not his, but that of his strange and annoying godfather, who seemed to want him to increase his friendship with both brothers, something he was not opposed to, but he did not want any pressure, something that Satoru did not seem to want to see. He needed some space, time to realize that he no longer had anyone in the world. But both his godfather and Tsumiki herself did not seem to want to let it sink in completely. Primero fu Tsumiki. He should have mourned the loss of his mother, he should have, and in a way, he did, crying in his godfather's arms. As eccentric and strange as Gojo Satoru was, he was truly a man who would be a pillar of support for anyone. Naruto discovered this when he cried his heart out after his mother had been dead for an hour. But it was truly Tsumiki, with her words, who made him cry for the second time and made him understand that he wasn't completely alone here, so that was what that girl's smile told him that night. The second was Satoru. But Satoru entering her life, she could only weep loudly when her godfather told her, with gentle words, that she could cry. He did so loudly against her shoulder, letting go of everything he felt in those tears that soaked the man's dark uniform, and that didn't seem to bother him, at least not too much. Those two people hadn't let him fully assimilate his mother's death. He had accepted it ever since she fell ill, encountering the wall of reality that was her untimely death. But when she finally left the world of the living, he couldn't accept it, no matter how much he had previously assimilated it, which was truly strange. If he had already assimilated it, why hadn't he? He already knew his mother would die. His mind accepted it as the harsh reality before him, which wouldn't escape his grasp. But his heart was capricious, and although not out loud, he did harbor hope for her recovery. Clearly, it wasn't going to be like that. He caught the ball again with his right hand. The students continued to file out, and among a small group of girls, he finally caught Tsumiki's brown hair amidst a tangle of uneven hair. Tsumiki had been good to him. Since his arrival and in the days since, she'd spent time with him even when she was studying, declaring that she didn't mind him lying on the floor, that she'd be there, even if he had a book in his hands. And since Tsumiki was the second person to see him cry, she could only accept it with a nod. She didn't want everyone to know that he'd cried his eyes out on a girl's shoulder, even though it was clear her brother suspected it, but he didn't seem bothered by her appearance. Ushiguro Megumi was more focused on his own business, in his opinion. Ah. Naruto-kun. Just as he'd noticed her, she'd noticed him despite all the people in between. For a few seconds, the blue and brown bonded, and after a while, the girl finally approached him as the Uzumaki put the ball in his hoodie pocket. "I thought Gojo-kun had something to tell you today. Is it good that you came?" she asked directly when she reached him. Placing a finger on his cheek and tilting her head slightly, she struck a thoughtful pose that was cute in the eyes of the male group. "I don't want him to get angry about this." The night before, just before she fell asleep, Satoru had entered her room with that carefree pose, his hair messy and the casual clothes he wore at home, along with dark glasses over his blue eyes that were lighter than her own, and mentioned that he had something important to tell her the next day. But morning came and Satoru hadn't been home when he got up, and since he didn't know what time he'd be back, he decided on his own to go get Tsumiki as he always did. "I don't think Satoru would get mad over something like this," he replied as gently as he could. Following Tsumiki's lead as she started walking, he shoved his hands in his jacket pockets. Hess too laid back. Hess probably sitting on his office couch, lazing around, and telling me that later tonight when I'm trying to sleep, just like he did when he gave me that warning last night. Tsumiki, who had known Gojo Satoru the longest, took Naruto's words as a truly probable and possible outcome. In fact, out of all the variables and paths, this was the one most likely to occur given the blindfolded man's temperament. He was extremely relaxed, as if everything was under his control, and nothing could escape his control. "That's most likely," she admitted after several seconds of deliberation. With Satoru being so calm and relaxed, almost copying one of his favorite manga characters, it was even likely that he'd forget and leave it for the next day. "It shouldn't be too important then, I guess." "Meh." It's Satoru, shrugging, he only said that as a validation of the adult's actions, which was actually acceptable to Tsumiki herself, who laughed lightly. "How was school today?" It wasn't a far-fetched question. In fact, it was always the first or second question Naruto threw at Tsumiki as they walked home, wrapped in bland, sometimes monosyllabic answers. "Megumi beat up some gang members again today. She seems to be using what Gojo-kun teaches her to fight the bad boys at school, or something like that." Tsumiki gave that answer with a soft thread, like every time she talked about her little brother. "And I don't want her to keep doing that." It didn't take a genius to notice the hidden pain in those words. As the older sister, Tsumiki must feel a certain responsibility for her brother's actions and carry the guilt of not being able to reason with him about his behavior and get him on the right path. However, even if she tried, Naruto saw in Megumi that she wouldn't back down from her own actions, so it would be hard to break someone who seemed made of black iron. He was even tempted to tell her so from the first time they spoke about Megumi. "He's going through a rough patch, I guess," he murmured slowly, looking down at his feet. "I've fought myself at his age. I have some scars from previous confrontations and beatings from the gangs in my neighborhood. Maybe Megumi is just searching for himself in those fights, or trying to find the answer to a question he hasn't expressed, to an inner fear or rage that he hasn't expressed." "Haha, I don't understand." Blushing with embarrassment, Tsumiki admitted her incomprehension. You don't need to understand. You could just write it off as a boy thing like we do when you girls do something we don't understand, the young man pointed out, laughing when he felt a pinch on his left arm. Megumi is, like everyone else, going through the rebellious stage of adolescence. The harsh reality will definitely make him focus. What made you focus? The blonde fell several meters. Tsumiki remained silent and Naruto began to ruminate on his thoughts. He never had a normal adolescence, nor did he even enter the rebellious stage, or have the time to do so. Even before entering the toughest stage of his life, he was in the care of his mother, caring for her and watching over her with everything she could, even working part-time at a local store to keep the house and pay the bills. The only thing he remembered that made him grow up was the news of his mother's illness, realizing that he would soon lose her and that his childhood had ended, giving way directly to adulthood. My mother's illness, he finally admitted. They had both stopped at a traffic light and he turned to look at Tsumiki. They were the same age, but he was still a centimeter taller than her, with a more defined body. When you can't be a child or a teenager, you don't go through the ramblings of one. I never asked myself the questions you or Megumi or other teenagers did. I went from being a boy who played with dolls and his friends in the park to a young man who took care of his mother and kept the house running entirely with his own effort and sweat. Tsumiki swallowed. Gently, she took the pendant that hung around her neck and looked at it for several seconds, pondering Naruto's words and his life. They had gone from having practically no one to having Gojo Satoru, a figure who always seemed to care for them and cherish them in a certain way, as if he knew something. For his part, Naruto had had no other figure than his mother, and he had no one supporting him when he took care of his mother and the house, taking a job and accepting that his mother would leave soon and leave him alone. If Gojo Satoru hadn't appeared, Naruto would be alone. Naruto-kun, accepting those thoughts, she looked up, still holding the pendant between her fingers. Showing a determined gleam and using her free hand, she gently cupped the Uzumaki's face. The boy felt the strange hand and a shiver ran down his spine, but he didn't remove that hand or make any attempt to move. You're not alone now. Gojo-kun, Megumi, and I will be your family now. You won't be alone, nor will you have to carry more on your own. Now we can help you. They both stood completely still in that position, facing each other, staring at each other, her hand cupping his face and body, unable to move. Blushing, confused and happy all at once, the boy could only feel his eyes filling with tears for the third time. And? He accepted it. He accepted that he wasn't alone, that his mother had died, and that his godfather had taken him in, so he wouldn't get lost in a dark and lonely world, which would probably soon explain why he hadn't been with them and why he had appeared after his mother's death. And I was certainly happy. Then he saw something out of the corner of his eye. It was a shadow, but it acted on its own momentum. Pulling Tsumiki aside and wrapping her in his arms, he took the powerful shove that launched them into the middle of the road, causing several cars to swerve in sudden, violent turns, causing chaos and constant accidents. And yet he gave his body to receive the impact that would have killed Fushiguro Tsumiki. 5. Unconsciousness. He was disoriented. He felt blood trickling down his temples and his body completely numb, as if he'd received a severe blow, or as if he'd trained himself to the point of breaking, only to reassemble himself like a simple children's puzzle, a take-apart doll. Swallowing, feeling the blood rush to his mouth, he tried to open his eyes, finding it too difficult, as if they weighed tons. What had happened? Why, no matter how hard he tried, couldn't his body move? Was he dead? He exhaled through his nostrils. He felt them open and follow his brain's command. If he was breathing, he wasn't dead, but he probably wasn't as healthy as he had been moments before being in that self-compromising position. So much so that he couldn't even feel his limbs or the fingers. It was as if his entire body had been disconnected from his brain except for his own nose. Tsumiki. The memory came back at the same time as the name. He had protected Tsumiki when a black figure had rushed toward them. He had covered her with his body and taken the full force of the powerful impact that had left him in the pitiful state he was in, a state close to death itself. But he wasn't dead. Will she be okay? Tsumiki was covered with his body. He held her close, never separating her from his, protecting her even from the fall, from the shock. She remembered how her back had hit a lamppost or perhaps a traffic light, but he still didn't let go of Tsumiki's iron grip. However, now she felt absolutely nothing other than the air rushing through her nose or her thoughts and images forcibly entering her head. He couldn't feel Tsumiki in his arms. That began to distress him. If Tsumiki wasn't in his arms or on top of him, where was she? Perhaps the blow had been so severe that his body became completely paraplegic. He couldn't even move his hands or legs. His eyelids felt so heavy, and all he could see was darkness surrounding him, as if he'd been locked in a pitch-black room with no windows, but still allowing air to enter so he could breathe. She didn't even feel the air brushing her face or rustling her hair. Her hair was always a mess, an explosion of strands flying from one side to the other, as if someone had placed her hair there and it had just exploded. Tsumiki. He remembered the moment, how Tsumiki was caressing him and how she was telling him that they were family from now on, that he wouldn't be alone again and that he wouldn't have to carry everything on his shoulders like he had been doing. Tsumiki. The scream was just dying in his throat. He couldn't even open his lips to pronounce a single letter. He couldn't vocalize enough to scream and call out to Tsumiki with all his might and calm the anxiety that was pounding his heart with all its might. Tsumiki. He took a deep breath. He felt the air, mixed with gasoline and ash, enter his nostrils. There was a fire close enough for his human sense of smell to locate and distinguish that subtle scent, which, in reality, was anything but subtle. It was reaching his lungs with all the force in the world, indicating that it was very close to his position. Tsumiki. Perhaps because of his desire to open his eyes or to calm his anxiety, his nose caught that simple scent of lavender that Tsumiki always carried with her and that he etched in his mind during those days. Also, to calm his own anxiety, he was imagining Tsumiki's soft, warm fingers caressing his hair, tangling in its messy, wild strands. Out of inertia, he tried to embrace that sensation or the person who was sending it. But as had happened before, his arms didn't respond to what his brain wanted and remained completely static, refusing to obey his commands. Naruto-kun. Wake up, please. We must move. And he just obeyed. Feeling like his eyelids weighed tons, Naruto used all his strength to open them. The brightness of the spring sun and the flames 10 meters away made him squint and blink a little, feeling like his eyes would be completely burned by both powerful lights. Naruto-kun. He felt thin arms embrace him. Letting out a soft moan, he allowed his neck to move and his eyes to see the girl he had protected with his body. Fushiguro Tsumiki. The teenager had no major injuries other than simple scratches that would heal completely in a few days without leaving a trace. What was remarkable about Tsumiki was that her clothes were disheveled and dusty, with her hair completely loose and falling over her shoulders. You look cute even now, Tsumiki. Naruto felt the word slurred out of his mouth. His throat was raw and dry, and his body didn't seem to want to move from the position it was in. I can't move. I can't feel my body. Tsumiki stirred and checked his condition. Blood was running down his right temple from hitting the traffic light, completely soaking his hoodie. His right arm was completely dislocated and limp, as if it didn't belong to Naruto. His left leg was impaled on a piece of metal, probably from one of the crashed cars. Shit, she lowered her head slightly and bit her lip. Naruto was in really bad shape and she probably couldn't carry him to safety alone. Their weights and bodies were different and she didn't have the strength to carry him. Can you try moving your right leg? There are no visible injuries, just like with your left arm. I'll try. But I can't promise anything. Feeling Tsumiki's hands on him to lift him up, Naruto struggled to get his right leg moving. He focused all his thoughts and commands on his uninjured leg, even frowning as if he were overthinking it. They were lucky. Within seconds, his leg buckled and he was able to stand, resting his weight mostly on Tsumiki. Are you okay? Naruto asked that even though he didn't see any injuries on her, but he was really worried about Tsumiki's health and safety. Can you handle me? If you can't, leave me and go too. I'm not going to leave you. That simple phrase cut off any rebuttal from him. He let the air escape from his mouth with a resigned sigh and tried, as much as possible, not to put his entire weight on Tsumiki. He didn't believe she had emerged completely unscathed from that accident and he seriously doubted she could continue walking much longer if he carried his entire heavy body on her. She is too kind. He looked at her out of the corner of his eyes narrowed in pain and the blood soaking her face. That pale, delicate feminine face was contorted with exertion, with the beginnings of beads of sweat forming on her forehead and pearling it with small glitters that indicated she was sweating. She was carrying him and that somehow made him feel like he was taking advantage of her. Therefore, to reduce the weight on her, he tried to take on as much of the load as his shattered body would allow. His left leg wasn't moving, nor was his right arm, due to a dislocation, while his leg was probably impaled on a car's iron. And it burns like hell. Now that he'd regained his senses, even if not 100%, he felt how shattered his body was. Probably 2 or 3 ribs were shattered, which is why a stabbing pain hit him with every breath he took in and out. Along the same lines, there was a gash on his right temple from which blood was still oozing, preventing him from fully opening his right eye, which was covered in blood. He no longer felt any open flesh or any other wounds that were exposed. But he didn't rule out the possibility that there were some internal wounds and that one might even be on his back, which he couldn't see no matter how hard he tried. Where is your bag? Being observant, Naruto noticed that Tsumiki's school bag had disappeared after the impact, getting lost among the pieces of cars, fire and blood. I lost it when we crashed, Tsumiki snorted as soon as she gave that answer. Naruto weighed about 70 kilos, by rough estimate, and dragging one leg like he was doing with his left made it feel like he was carrying much more weight, which caused her stamina to constantly decrease, causing her to be constantly short of breath and requiring more oxygen much more frequently. I wasn't carrying anything of much value. I don't believe you, Naruto swallowed hard. He felt a whiplash hit his back and almost fell to the ground on his leg. If Tsumiki hadn't grabbed him by the waist, he would have ended up on the ground. You always carry that photo of Megumi on your phone. It's very important to you. Because you said so? I've watched you when you see her, he admitted, his voice lowering due to the pain. It's one of the few photographs where you and Megumi are smiling. And, considering it's one of the few, I'd say it's your favorite photograph of your brother. Tsumiki remained silent for the next 7 eternal meters. Naruto was right. That photo was the most important one she had with Megumi, and she hated herself right now for losing her phone, the only place she had it. She was very lucky that Megumi had smiled for that photo, and even more lucky that she had wanted to be in one. Separate. She blinked. One moment she was holding Naruto, the next she was being pushed aside. In slow motion, as she fell, she saw the boy standing a few feet away from her, no more than 2, with his arm extended, indicating that he was the one who pushed her. She also saw in slow motion how something invisible, like a disturbance in the air, moved forward and collided head-on with the Uzumaki. Ah! He also saw how, in slow motion, the boy spat an immense amount of blood onto the pavement and how he fell onto his legs, his mouth being soaked in dark, almost black blood. Then Naruto. Don't move, Tsumiki. The Uzumaki's scream stopped her. He had understood something. It wasn't a car that crashed into them. It wasn't a person who pushed them or a careless cyclist who crashed into them. It wasn't even an actual animal that pushed them. Ever since he was little, he'd always seen things, though his mother later told him they weren't things, but spirits or curses, typical exorcist terms that didn't interest him much. These spirits had always been in his world, but they gradually disappeared as he grew older. Perhaps because he learned to minimize them and forget about them completely. Even so, he would occasionally see these spirits again. And it was one of these beings that pushed them. He realized this when that spirit landed 20 meters away from them and pointed at them. Shortly after, he pushed Tsumiki aside and received, as before, the impact directly in his body, except this time it was square in the chest. Cough. He felt his body lurch forward and he coughed up a huge amount of blood onto the asphalt. His head pounded and his heart pounded in his chest like a hammer hitting a nail, a constant sound that echoed in his ears like the incessant sound of his own heartbeat. Tsumiki Naruto gathered all the strength he had. He had to make her go away. He never fought a spirit or whatever, but this one really wanted to hurt them. Go. Now. He'd never fought one of those things before. He didn't even know if he could hit one of those things. Could he? Wasn't it like a ghost or something? It wasn't like his broken body gave him much of a chance of facing or surviving that thing. But he didn't have many avenues to take, either. Naruto. Tsumiki. He growled loudly. Blood in the form of saliva escaped from his mouth as he spoke. Go away. But he saw in her eyes that she wouldn't leave. He understood from that exchange of glances that Tsumiki Fushiguro wasn't someone who would abandon him to her mercy, no matter how bad things got. TSK. Taking the only possible route, seeing Tsumiki approaching at the same time that the ugly creature was looking at them, he could only stand up as best he could and face the creature with his body. He couldn't allow Tsumiki to get hurt. He couldn't allow her to be killed. He never really had any problems with those creatures, but it must have been due to his mother's presence as much as that man's. When Tsumiki reached her side, the spirit once again spewed an invisible wind. It seemed like a fish gasping for oxygen. The spirit puffed out its cheeks and then sent that blast of wind toward them with force, hollowing its cheeks until it looked as if it had died of starvation. I won't allow Tsumiki to be harmed. He accepted death when his mother died. Everyone would die at some point in their lives. But he couldn't simply let Tsumiki, someone who was good to him, come to harm. Grabbing the girl by the shoulder and forcing her down, he simply stretched out his arm with his hand closed, forming a fist, and screamed in helplessness. Fuck. Following only her own despair, she struck that energy with her own hand. Tsumiki opened her eyes, watching and feeling the air violently stir her hair. Shit. When the air ceased and the pressure disappeared, the girl stared at Naruto with wide eyes. The hand the Uzumaki had used to stop that attack was raw, covered in residue from a glowing orange energy. Yes, there. A dull sound. Tsumiki saw the boy's unconscious body lying on the ground, bleeding, his skin much paler than usual. When she tried to move, she felt dizzy and eventually lost consciousness. The last thing he saw was a pair of dark brown boots, accompanied by the echoes of heels. 6. False reality. He snapped his eyes open, feeling like all the pain in his body had vanished as if it had never existed, as if those 2 blows he'd received directly on himself had never happened, as if he hadn't jumped up and protected Tsumiki, using his hand to repel that 3rd swing that shattered her hand. When a limb came to mind, he looked at the hand he'd used to strike that invisible swing. His right hand. It should have been shattered, a bloody mess he couldn't even recognize. But instead of a mess of flesh, bone, and blood, what he found was a completely unharmed hand, without a single scar or sign of having collided with an invisible wall, capable of killing him and Tsumiki the instant it collided with them. Puzzled, he removed the sheet covering her body. There were no bandages. No blood. The pain was completely gone, and he didn't even see a single scar on her completely naked teenage body, which generated even more intrigue and confusion in him. Hadn't he been hit by an invisible shockwave? Hadn't his leg been pierced by a piece of iron from a car? Hadn't his arm been dislocated by the crash into the lamppost? Even the internal injuries he knew he had didn't seem to be where they should be. That attack by the vengeful spirit had never happened. He brought his hand up to his face and looked at it. There were no scars. No signs of a struggle. There was nothing. Was it all a dream, a product of his subconscious? Was it all simply an imagination of his disturbed mind? Was this reality, or was it another dream caused by the blows to his head from the same incident? Tsumiki. Remembering the girl, he decided to leave that room to see how she was doing. But that wasn't the room he used to live in Satoru's house. There were posters of anime characters, video game characters, and some actors he loved and considered good. That was his room. He froze completely when that thought hit him. That room with that geeky decor was his old room, the one still decorated in his old family home, where he had lived with his mother until her death and his godfather's care. But how did it get there? He swallowed hard. He felt as soon as he did so that his mouth was completely dry and that he needed to get some liquid in. But the first thing he needed was to find some clothes and hide his nakedness so he could investigate this place, which was exactly like his old home. Was his time with that man merely a dream that had lasted too long, ending when his body was injured? It was all too confusing. The pain he felt when his mother died. The pain his body felt when he was attacked by that monster. Even the pain in his chest now at the thought that Tsumiki had been just a creation of his imagination. All of that pain was real. He felt it in his body, in his soul, and in his heart. What the buck is going on? He yelled at himself in frustration. Like any young man, he needed to find a point that would make everything clear. Tsumiki, Satoru, and Megumi couldn't be people his mind had created just from a dream. The pain his body felt when that force pushed him and Tsumiki was too real to be just an imagining of his mind within a dream. He didn't even have that much imagination to create an entire world in a span of hours in his mind. She took a deep breath. With some of her old clothes in her hands, she proceeded to get dressed and leave that room, which was a carbon copy of her old one. That bothered him too much. The boy pulled the zipper and closed the jacket over the t-shirt that had covered his bare torso. Taking a deep breath, his second in 10 seconds, he walked to the door and took the knob with his right hand. Although his eyes saw it completely intact, something told him deep down that the hand couldn't be real, that it couldn't be as perfect as he saw it, and that something was wrong with his perception. Determined to eliminate doubts and confusion, to clarify everything, he left his room and found himself in a hallway he knew perfectly well. His eyes moved through the pictures and photographs, seeing images of himself when he was younger, always with a blood-red-haired woman right behind him, smiling even wider than he did during the photographs. Mother. He had promised himself he wouldn't cry again. He had done so when he had cried for the last time on Tsumiki's shoulder. But even so, seeing those beautifully arranged photographs, he could only give in to the torrent of emotions that flooded him and fall to his knees, caressing one of them. All those photographs remained in his old house when he went to live with Satoru. Of all of them, he only took the most recent one with him, not wanting to have to remember everything he'd experienced with his mother at such a fragile time as the one he was going through. Yet there they were. Not a single one was missing. Each and every one hung along the hallway, including the one he'd taken with him. That was strange. He regained control of his senses when he finally managed to finish crying on his knees on the floor. He closed his hand over the photograph and took it from the frame, smashing it against the floor in a sudden burst of blind rage. How was it possible that the photograph he'd taken with him was there? That photograph had always been in the hospital room where his mother was admitted, right on the bedside table to the right of her bed. It couldn't possibly be there if everything about Satoru was a dream. The boy gritted his teeth and started walking toward the stairs, stepping over the photograph he had smashed against the floor. His foot stepped on it and smashed it to pieces, creating a crunching sound that would undoubtedly have alerted the people below. But that, to him, was the least important thing right now. He was blinded by rage. Sachi. Her foot stopped on the bottom step. Her eyes opened wide, so much so that her eyelids seemed to have vanished completely. Mom. With blood-red hair. indigo eyes with hints of violet. A round face, with lightly tanned skin as smooth as a teenager's. Unmarked, with a slender body, the woman stared back at him and smiled when he seemed completely lost. "What's wrong, Naru-chan? Do you miss your mother so much that you've forgotten she existed?" A hint of amusement graced that question. Naruto couldn't answer and stood there on the last step, an inch away from stepping down, his hand on the handrail, feeling his soul fall at his feet. "You're very pale. Did you eat well while I was in the hospital? If not, you could have asked the neighbor or the old man for help. Even Toji-kun could have helped you." Then, he blinked several times. "Hospital? Toji-kun?" Swallowing, the boy finally stepped down the last step and faced the woman with a skeptical look. "Who are you?" Naruto asked the question directly. Beating around the bush now wouldn't be ideal. He had to figure out what was going on, and doing so directly was best. The woman blinked several times, creating a simple, beautiful movement with her eyelashes that could have captivated any man. The boy had to admit that this representation of his mother was perfect. He had even copied the movement of her eyelashes when she blinked and the sensation they generated. With a finger to her cheek, the woman tilted her head to the right, as if considering the question Naruto had thrown directly at her. When she seemed to find it, she returned to her position and twisted her lips into a warm smile. "I'm your mother, Naru-chan. Can't you see that? I left the hospital 2 days ago, when Toji-kun finally paid for my surgery, and I came home when I finally recovered. Don't buck with me. That operation cost millions." Infusing his voice with the rage he felt, Naruto swung his arm threateningly at the woman, as if he had slapped her away. She only took 2 steps back, her face frightened. Plop. He felt a strong grip on his arm. Naruto turned his head and found menacing eyes staring at him, dark, black like 2 bottomless pits. "Brat," the man's thick voice filled her ears. "Be careful what you say. Your mother's still recovering and can't be startled. What the hell are you doing anyway? Did you hit your head or something? You helped her get settled yourself. Place." Slipping out of that iron grip, she stepped away from the man, her eyes narrowing menacingly. What was going on here? Why was her mother still alive, and why did everything seem to be resolved? He took a third deep breath. He filled his lungs with a good amount of oxygen and tried to process everything that was happening while calming his mind and the anger boiling inside his soul. She listed what she had discovered. She was in her old house. Her mother had finally been operated on by the hospital thanks to some money she didn't know where it had come from. And that man was the one called Toji-kun, whom her mother had been mentioning every few seconds. A man who undoubtedly inspired fear with those eyes, that immense body, and that hair as dark as a crow's wing. But everything was confusing. "Sachi," he felt his mother's hand gently cup his face. "Everything's okay now. Everything's okay." No, it wasn't her mother. The hand of the woman who pretended to be Uzumaki Kushina was completely cold, devoid of the warmth that always filled her mother's caresses and lit up her eyes, but the woman's were completely dull. Place. But the swipe of his hand, he removed that hand from his face. With eyes filled with tears of rage, he glared at the imposter. "Who the buck are you?" He let the anger spill out of his mouth in the form of a question. He narrowed his eyes as his body tensed. He flexed the fingers of both hands until they closed completely and formed 2 fists. As a teenager, he, too, had fought with classmates or gangs. He always had, and he was used to fighting since his mother fell ill. He was going to bury his fist in that woman's face. "Sachi. I'm your mother, Kushina. Don't you recognize me? Don't you see me?" The woman slowly lost her smile. She pointed at her face with her hands, and her expression slowly darkened. "Can't you see that I'm your mother? You've copied everything from my mother. Eyelash movements, fragrance, body, hair," he listed everything that thing had copied from his mother. "But the only thing you failed at in trying to copy her is her touch. When she touched my face, her fingers were always warm and gave off a feeling of security. You, on the other hand, have cold fingers and I feel repulsed by you." Naruto took a fighting stance. He tensed his arms, placed his legs at shoulder height, stretched his entire torso until he was completely firm. "I'll repeat it again. What are you?" He remained calm. He focused his mind on his surroundings. Without taking his eyes off his mother, he also kept his attention on the man to his left, the one who took the name Toji from the mouth of the figure, trying to take the form of his mother. Rash. Pam. He felt his arms go numb. He felt the force behind that movement push him until he crashed against the wall. He let the air he'd been holding escape from his mouth with a moan accompanied by saliva. Edge slowly, Naruto looked at the woman who was his mother. She was no longer Uzumaki Kushina. The skin melting, the wide and empty eyes were proof enough of that. Kejijij. He opened his eyes. Chrome. By inertia, he grabbed the railing and jumped up, evading the direct blow from that silent, ferocious man. Since he'd only said one sentence, Toji remained silent and dedicated himself to attacking him. Kejijij. And that laugh, that annoying laugh, was making him feel even angrier. Filled with rage, seeing how his gaze was turning completely red, he deflected the man's next blow with his own knee, landing right on top of him. "Don't buck with me, shit." He didn't know what he did. He let the feelings, everything else, go from his mind and body and moved on instinct while his mind was completely at peace. Everything was very slow for him. He moved his arm while deflecting Toji's. He turned his torso completely and kept his gaze fixed on the man. He felt and saw sparks surrounding his right fist. He let it all out in one fell swoop. The black flash destroyed everything. 7 red. There was no more home. There were no more memories. Everything that had once been there was no more, completely erased, and he didn't know how it had happened, though he didn't care, because it finally told him that this woman wasn't his mother. He had only let himself be carried away for a few seconds. When he counterattacked the man named Toji, everything slowed down much more for him, and he entered a feeling of explosive ecstasy, similar to his own athletes called it, believing and feeling that he could do anything he set his mind to. But at the same time, that feeling was slightly different from his own, creating a distortion in space that he believed was only a dream. But that black flash was not a dream. Standing in that blank space, he looked at his right hand, still formed into the fist that had struck Toji, and buried all that feeling inside his enemy. Shortly after doing so, that explosion of energy occurred following the blow and completely erased the illusion that formed his home, the photographs, and everything that strange thing had created to solidify his appearance as Uzumaki Kushina. He lowered his arm. His understanding of what had happened, or what he had done, was zero. He didn't understand what had happened or how he had managed to create that burst. He only remembered that, when he entered that state, a black flash had accompanied him in the movement and buried itself in Toji's illusion, making it disappear. And then everything exploded. He let out a breath between his lips. Even though his right arm trembled, whether from excitement or nerves, he couldn't do anything unless he escaped from that blank space he seemed to have fallen into, which seemed to indicate that he had truly died and was in a kind of limbo. Although he felt alive. He cracked his neck. He'd been tense throughout the conversation with those two illusions, and that had made his body ache slightly from the strain placed on his muscles. Kajejijij. Hearing that eerie, dark, and certainly mocking laugh, he turned and tilted his head slightly upward. His eyes widened when he saw that enormous dark, almost black, purple mass, completely wrapped in eyes, floating in that space. He took a half step back. What was that thing? It was nothing like the monster that had attacked him and Tsumiki just before they'd entered that nightmare, because that was the only word he could find in his entire vocabulary to define it. A true nightmare that even many adults wouldn't want to have. That thing turned into my mother and that man. His train of thought was cut short. He covered his face with his arms as a shockwave crashed into his body. He was thrown backward and rolled on the ground for several meters, finally coming to a stop, lying face down, one eye closed and the other half open, staring at that mass with all his eyeballs fixed on him. Not a single one was looking in any other direction, or so he felt about that thing. Here we go again. Using his arm, he managed to get to his knees. His body began to feel as if his shoulders were carrying a ton, and he felt himself sinking into the pristine white ground, as if something were forcing him down. Using his leg now, he was finally able to stand up, letting out a snort that sounded like resignation. I don't know what the hell that thing is. But I have to get out of here. With that in mind, the blond man took up a fighting stance. His mother had taught him not to give up and not to let himself be hit, even though the thing wasn't exactly human, and hitting it with his fists wouldn't matter much. Come on, you filthy ball. Out of the corner of his eye, the boy saw something moving against him. Following his instinct, he twisted his body and raised his arms as high as he could, just as he received a second blast of energy that sent him skidding backward a few meters. He let his arms fall. He panted slightly, feeling the sweat running down his face, drop by drop. That's it, you disgusting eye bag. Feeling overwhelmed, Naruto let out a mocking cry at the creature again. He was being overwhelmed. Soon, the thing would seriously injure his body, and he wouldn't be able to continue defending himself as he had been doing so far. What? Aren't you coming, eye bag? Anticipating the creature's action, Naruto leaped to the left as it attacked him. He planted his foot on the ground and pushed himself backward as the creature's next attack came for him. Skidding, the boy escaped the attacks without any damage to his body, either internal or external. Exhaling, he wiped his face with his jacket sleeve and stared at the enormous dark mass floating above his head. It was truly grotesque, straight out of some poorly made horror movie, but it gave off a chilling image, thanks to those enormous moving eyes. Every time he attacks, one of his eyes seems to open much wider than the rest. If I can master the pattern he uses, I'll be able to evade all of his attacks much more easily. While that thing had been attacking, he had decided to survive those attacks, so he began searching for a pattern in his enemy's attacks in order to survive. He had managed to partially discover the thing's method of attack, but the pattern was still a few steps away from him, and even if he could find it, he highly doubted his fragile human body could continue to be pushed to that extent. I was so comfortable with Tsumiki, he muttered. Naruto finally accepted that he couldn't let this go, and that if he wanted to come back alive, he'd have to find a way to escape that thing or kill it. I'm going to. Brack. Cough. He had learned how that thing moved. He had understood that, to overcome it, he would have to move and find the pattern his enemy followed to attack him. Despite all that, the monster had finally caught up with him. He was thrown several meters. He didn't see or anticipate the movement against him, which caught him off guard, allowing the thing to attack him at will, which it had done without him being able to do anything to prevent it. He took the blow directly. He felt his body being yanked and squeezed from the center of his torso, and he offered no resistance as he was thrown backward, spitting blood, until he fell to the ground on his back. Broken bones. Torn muscles. Internal bleeding. Just like when he'd saved Tsumiki from that first invisible blast, now he too found himself wounded and lying on the ground, on his back, tasting the metallic taste of blood in his mouth. He wanted to turn around, to get up. But his body didn't seem to want to obey his brain's commands. He gasped. He let his body rest for at least a few seconds before getting back up, something that hadn't been in his plans. He had lost to that thing and would soon be reunited with his real mother. That the creature had used his mother's appearance only fueled the feelings of sadness and pain he felt over her loss. Shit. He gasped. He felt his lungs collapse, blood flooding in, leaving little room for air. It felt like the direct blow to his chest had shattered his ribcage, causing bone splinters to lodge in his lungs. At least I won't die from tobacco, ha ha ha. He wanted to sleep. He needed to take a nap, close his eyes, and not open them again for a long time. But if he did, he understood that he would never open them again, and he was fine with that. He could reunite with his mother and rest without the problems that come with an adult life. Although he would have liked to say goodbye to Tsumiki and hug her one more time. But that was far from his control. I hate when I see my loved ones hurting so much. It's all upsetting. Even though he closed his eyes, he opened them again at that male voice. With an effort, he managed to straighten slightly. Standing right in front of him, between him and that thing, was Gojo Satoru, his godfather. No need to talk, Satoru slipped a finger under the blindfold covering her eyes, gently separating it from her skin. Lie down, Naruto-kun. I'll take this from now on. The man let out a sigh. He was angry. He'd been called home from school to supervise some students' classes and prepare the next classes for the students who would be entering the following year. He'd known, ever since Naruto saw Megumi's dogs, that the boy had cursed energy. How could he not? He was the son of two sorcerers who had graduated from the Tokyo Metropolitan Area Magic Technical School and two of their classmates. Knowing both of them, he didn't believe the boy would be born unable to see curses or be even remotely connected to the world of sorcery. It was certainly absurd to even think about it. But his mother was always stubborn, and when he started seeing curses, she only took care of it to keep him away from the world of jujutsu. He was upset about that. Why deny his godson the chance to be a sorcerer? But he understood that Kushina had lost too much in the world of sorcery and that she didn't want to lose her son. That's why, when she died, he was going to continue denying everything. But he didn't count on Naruto starting to see Megumi's Shikigami and then being attacked by a first-degree curse. Now, the entire screen that Kushina had put up for her son had completely fallen to pieces. I'm a little pissed off, Satoru removed the dark blindfold from his eyes, revealing his eyeballs, with that crystalline iris hue, so I won't hold back with you. Don't take it personally even though it is. With a flick of a finger, he disappeared from both Naruto's and the first-degree curse's sight, bewildering the boy as he looked at his godfather. Satoru reappeared above the same curse and placed a hand over it. Pam. The curse shot out towards the ground, crashing against it and generating an immense cloud of dust. I'm going to delete you. Facing him, the sorcerer raised his index finger, lightly brushing his lips as he stared at the curse. Before the myriad eyes of that curse, a red sphere slowly began to form over Satoru's right index finger. Ha! He watched as the curse opened its eyes. He felt the cursed energy swirl around the enormous dark bag of eyes and saw his enemy launch its attack at him. He stood completely still, receiving the full force of the powerful attack that would have ended the life of any normal sorcerer. Satoru. That's a Shikihante. This reverse rotation, red glow. From the dust, a red sphere shot out toward the curse, slowly growing to a considerable size. Unable to avoid the spell, the curse was completely absorbed by that sphere of energy, and in a blast that completely shook the space, the enemy was erased from the existential plane as he was completely crushed against the ground. Feeling the air nearly tearing him off his feet, the young man watched as his godfather tore the hideous thing apart. Could Satoru see those things too? Hadn't his shattered mind been the one that had created all of this? He would have continued watching. He wanted to get up and walk over to Gojo Satoru, take him in his arms, and give him a big hug before he fell unconscious. But his mind had reached its limit and the piercing pain in his chest made him fall back, sinking into his exhaustion and his desire to sleep. Even though he knew that if he closed his eyes, the chances of ever opening them again were slim, he still let his eyelids droop and his body finally allow itself to be surrounded by the darkness of unconsciousness. He was too tired to stand any longer. 8. Uzumaki. The man let his body sink slowly onto the sofa. Blindfolded, he looked around while he waited for the others he was in the room for. He had been called by Principal Yaga for an urgent meeting at school. He knew exactly what it was due to. The special grade curse that had attacked both his godson and Megumi's sister, which was truly strange to a certain extent. Had the seals Kushina placed on her son dissolved so much that he had attracted such a curse? When Naruto was little, both he and his mother, Kushina, had felt the boy's cursed energy even when they were far away. It wasn't like their own, not as powerful, but it was sweet, appealing to those who knew about cursed energy and how to use it. It wasn't long before the curses were upon him. The professor sighed as he leaned forward, clasping his hands under his chin as he thought about it. It was Kushina who had placed a powerful seal on her son to contain his cursed energy, to ward off the curses. He himself had dealt with some that Naruto thought he saw, although he had actually seen them, and they were surely registered in his mind, as if they had been a fleeting childhood memory. Although knowing the boy, that would be unlikely. He would remember it and he wouldn't treat it as a mere memory. He would associate it with what had happened recently. Taking in the current events, he thought about what the elders would do now. Execute a boy and lose a valuable sorcerer. They had all felt Naruto's cursed energy when he faced the curse, or when he saved Tsumiki from being cut into 1,000 pieces, or crushed by that invisible energy using his own hand. A hand that didn't end up as bad as he expected when he saw it. According to Ieri, the cursed energy partially shielded the fist the boy used to block that attack, thus repelling the curse's movement and saving himself and Tsumiki herself. It was a stroke of luck, both for him and the girl. If Megumi had gotten hysterical just from that, how would he have acted if she had ended up much more hurt? It wasn't something he wanted to think about right now or deal with in the near future. It would be better to put it aside and lock it in a box with chains and locks. The bandage professor shook his head at the sound of the sliding door, followed shortly by the sound of footsteps. Satoru. Gojo Satoru, sitting as he was, tilted his head slightly as that voice reached his ears. It was old, tired, and raspy, like that of an ancient old codger. It didn't take long for him to figure out whose voice it was. He had heard it before in other meetings, whether between schools or with the higher-ups in Jujutsu. Old Gakuganji, the master murmured, hearing the fabric rustling against the floor and the creaking of the sofa in front of him, indicating no doubt that the man had sat down on it. I didn't expect you to come all the way here. Not from Kyoto, anyway. Gakuganji Yoshinobu snorted at the slight mocking tone that filled the Tokyo master's voice. He was old, head of the Kyoto school, and, to all intents and purposes, still a member of the upper echelons of the Jujutsu world, so respect for traditions and rules was in his DNA, and he rarely broke them. In fact, Satoru himself never saw him break a rule, not even to save a student. Put that tone aside, Satoru, the headmaster placed both hands on the staff he was using. Beside him, a woman dressed in traditional Maiko attire occupied the vacant side of the sofa. We're here regarding the special grade curse that you and Mei took just as a boy was about to die. Don't dawdle, old man, Satoru leaned back now, erasing all seriousness from his face or words. I know exactly what you wanted to call the boy a vessel or a special case. Yes, Uzumaki-kun possesses a peculiarly strange cursed energy. It attracts curses like honey attracts flies, the woman replied in all seriousness. The Ori Utaham was a jujutsu master within the Kyoto Center under the command of the Gakuganji director. Like the old man, the woman was strict with the rules and, to a certain extent, intolerant of Gojo Satoru's own attitude, although ultimately the Tokyo master always sought the well-being and balance of everyone within his area. Well, that's a peculiarity of my boy. But we're already taking care of that, the teacher said, giving a completely cheeky smile. Gakuganji cleared his throat. Really? You taking care of something? Allow me to doubt it, Saturo the Kyoto headmaster declared, staring with one eye wide open at the Jujutsu master. The last time you took care of something like that, it ended with Kushina's death. 3 great clans operated at the helm of the Jujutsu world. The Gojo, the Kamo, and the Zenin. These 3 clans were known as the 3 great clans and had the presence and power to oppose the higher echelons of Jujutsu due to their strong bond to cursed energy, with Satoru himself among the Gojo, a balance in the supernatural world that kept everything in perpetual balance. But there was a 4th clan. It was never recognized as a clan within the greats of the Jujutsu world, and even the highest-ranking officials doubted its ties to the world of sorcery. These were the Uzumaki, a clan of Onmyoji dedicated to the occult and divination. It was not even truly known if these people could actually divine anything or discover supernatural things. But when someone went to them, the number of cases dropped drastically when one of their members appeared in the area where a spirit was acting. Eventually, the Uzumaki disappeared over time, and their practices, those alien to traditional jujutsu, were lost to everyone. What happened was never known. That's something I regret, Saturo hardened his face. He remembered how Kushina had eventually been cursed with something that even he couldn't remove. Had it been one of the ancient curses from the Heian era? It wasn't something he could figure out in the long run. The boy doesn't know his mother was cursed. He must still believe his mother died of natural causes, Saturo. Don't reveal this. It could cause trouble with the boy and you'd earn his hatred when he finds out you were involved. It's not something the higher-ups would really appreciate. Saturo narrowed his eyes behind the blindfold. Wouldn't the higher-ups appreciate that? He didn't appreciate the old men in the upper echelons, including himself. He snorted but remained calm for the next few seconds. Seconds in which a cold silence settled over the room. For this occasion, I will keep the information about Kushina's death hidden, he replied coldly. Gyakuganji didn't need to see the shaman's eyes to feel that he was trying to stab them into him like two daggers of ice. I hope at least Kushina's last words about her son's future are kept. It's the least you can do for her, old man. Gyakuganji took the silky white beard on his chin in his hand. Without looking at the strongest shaman, the headmaster of Kyoto weighed the master's words. Break Kushina's last wishes. While the higher-ups could do so, they wouldn't gain anything from it in the long run. Yes, they would maintain control over the boy. But in the near future, that could backfire and deal them a severe blow. Good, the headmaster finally gave in to the intense attention of Gojo Satoru himself. You will take custody of the boy and introduce him to the world of sorcery so that he will be ready for the following year. The high hands will want him within the school, either Tokyo or Kyoto, and he should at least survive his first lessons. What happens to the boy will depend entirely on your ability as a teacher and tutor. You know very well that the world of jujutsu is full of dangers. The brat has a strange relationship with curses that always end up putting him in danger. First it was the one that cursed Kushina, and now this one that almost killed him. Both him and Zenin's sister. The boy is Fushiguro. He's still a Zenin, the headmaster exclaimed, rapping with his wooden staff. The world of jujutsu never stays the same. With the failed mission you took from Jito Suguru, Tenjin-sama is now in a more delicate state. You mustn't fail in this as well, Satoru. Grooming the next Zenin boy and the Uzumaki boy could be crucial for us right now. Do you understand? This is not the time for childish games like the one you played to take Toji's boy. Fushiguro Toji, once Zenin, was Megumi's own father. Satoru met him when the man was hired to eliminate Tenjin's next vessel, and it was Toji himself who almost killed him. If it hadn't been for something Ieri explained that took the last of him, he wouldn't be sitting there talking to the old man right now. He sighed. He was the last of the Gojo, the balance of the jujutsu world currently. Up until now, he'd been able to do whatever he wanted, like taking Megumi and not letting her leave the Zenin clan. However, his free movement was dwindling, and he could take those things seriously. I'll take this completely seriously, old man, the strongest shaman muttered, assuming his relaxed pose. But seriously, you shouldn't be so sour. No curse has yet been born that can break this balance, nor has an enemy who has even come close to achieving it. You should relax that old body of yours before it has a heart attack. Iori sighed. With her slender, delicate hands, she took the cup one of Yaga's plushies had placed right in front of her. She recognized that this tea was truly delicious, and it filled her with warmth. But it was definitely good for winter. Letting out a sigh through his teeth, the Kyoto principal shook his head as the door opened again. Now, Principal Yaga walked through the door to escort them. Yaga. Sorry for the delay, he apologized. The shaman sat down next to Satoru, his face serious. I was checking on the boy after the incident. And? According to Ieri herself, the boy will wake up this afternoon or early tomorrow morning. Yaga took her cup of tea and took a small sip. There won't be any major physical after effects. However, she assured me that there could be some psychological ones in the future. She didn't clarify whether they were irreparable. We'll just have to wait and see how the boy develops before making any decisions. At least he himself should be informed once he wakes up. Bakuganji found this acceptable, so he nodded at the Tokyo director's words. For the time being, it was best to keep the Uzumaki boy on his side due to his future implications in the world of jujutsu. Satoru, as until now, will remain his tutor and teacher. No one will be able to refute that, and for 1 year from the moment he awakens, Uzumaki Naruto will be trained in the arts of jujutsu so that he can take his place as a student within one of the two schools. That is what the higher-ups have decreed and something that no one will be able to remove anytime soon. Gyakuganji looked at both men with narrowed eyes. Yaga might be pleased, but Satoru. No, the head of the Gojo family really wouldn't be pleased with anything that wasn't in line with his very modernizing ideal. If either party backs down, be it you or the boy Satoru, the boy will be executed and the Onmyoji clan will be completely exterminated from the Jujutsu world. Do you understand? Satoru clenched his hands. He cracked his knuckles slightly at the sudden movement, but he didn't make any threatening gestures. He remained calm and stared through his blindfold at the man standing a mere 3 meters away from him. Yes, I understand. It wasn't something he was comfortable with. Nor was it something he could remove. It was better for Uzumaki Naruto to enter the world of Jujutsu directly. 9 feeling. He woke up feeling immensely tired, as if all his energy had been drained. His body also seemed completely numb, with no way of moving a single limb or even blinking. He couldn't do anything, both because of his own pain and because of the body that was partially crushing him, especially the right side of his body. He turned his head, finding Tsumiki on top of him, her entire body on his right side, snoring softly and displaying a cute face while she slept. If she had been pretty before, she now resembled an angel with soft features and clear skin. She didn't seem worried or hurt at all. He examined Tsumiki's body from his position. He breathed a sigh of relief when he saw no signs of injuries or serious wounds, which was fine with him. At least she wasn't hurt. He then let his head sink into that soft hospital pillow. He looked, with his blue eyes, at the white ceiling above his head, which he also knew. He had been in hospitals before. Many times, in fact. Not least for injuries or illness. Whenever he visited one of those places, he accompanied his own mother. Given her health, she went from doctor to doctor until she settled in the hospital closest to his city, and he practically lived there, constantly visiting his mother and sleeping with her. Because of this, he perfectly knew the ceiling that was now above him, with the lamp off, watching it vigilantly, wanting to be turned on. He let out a sigh, more from exhaustion than resignation. His body was heavy, his mind, still unable to grasp the reality they were in, was still stuck in a daydream, and because of this, he couldn't think completely clearly. Maybe, just maybe, a coffee could wake him up completely and give him the energy he needed. He ran his tongue around the inside of his mouth. He could feel the blood that had escaped with each blow. It even seemed to be still inside his mouth. He could taste it, with that characteristic salty, half-oxidized taste. But, after all, it was only a fragment of a memory, because when he ran his tongue over it again, he felt absolutely nothing inside his mouth, not even a miserable wound. He snorted in disgust at being in bed and squeezed his eyes shut. Maybe if he closed them and stopped staring at the ceiling, he could finally fall asleep and wake up to someone else in that room with him, not just Tsumiki, who needed to rest. It was then that a question struck him, a doubt that needed an answer. If he was completely out of the game, who had saved him from that monster and who had taken Tsumiki so that she wouldn't suffer any more harm with the monster out of her mind? He knew perfectly well that it hadn't been him. He didn't even know how he had saved Tsumiki the first time, or how he had been able to sense that energy coming from the 100-eyed monster that was attacking him. He had never fought against those things, nor had he been able to kill any of them. If he had been the one to defeat them, it would have been strange. So who was it? He didn't remember anything since unconsciousness struck him, and he couldn't even try to connect the voice he heard with a face or a person he knew. Everything that had happened before he lost consciousness was just a memory, a completely pixelated image in his mind that held little relevance to him. He was glad to be alive, he didn't deny that, but he was even happier that Tsumiki had come out of that situation alive and hadn't sustained any significant injuries, something that would undoubtedly hurt him because, from the start, it had been entirely his fault. He should have foreseen that those things would come back into his life once his mother died. The movement made him lose his train of thought. He moved his head slightly, as much as he could, to see how his companion was beginning to wake up. First, she opened her eyes, which were large and bright. Her next step was to fully stretch her slender body, even resembling a cat stretching. The last step she took was to yawn loudly, and he only laughed lightly at that, watching as Tsumiki scratched the sleep from her eyes. "Good morning, sleepyhead." The words came out as a mere whisper, a small breath that lightly brushed the teenager's ears. Tsumiki then stretched her body completely for the second time, shifting the clothes covering her body. It was then that the boy saw the blanket that had surely covered the girl during the night. Naruto-kun. He expected, of course, some reaction from Tsumiki herself. Being the teenager she was, if she hadn't reacted when he recovered, it would have been completely strange for him and out of character with her. But he certainly didn't expect her to hug him tightly, as if he'd been in a coma or going through something serious. That's not what happened. He let her hug him, bury her head in his shoulder, and even cry a little for him, with a few tears in between, though not too many. It wasn't as if she'd been on the verge of death or anything, right? Hey. Seriously. Naruto placed both hands on Tsumiki's and, with a little force on his side, moved her away from him a few inches. Not too much. He could feel Megumi's sister's breath against his face, brushing against his skin. He could even count her eyelashes, one by one. I'm fine, okay? No need to be so dramatic. I don't have any serious injuries and all my body parts are complete. I'm fine. He tried to calm her down. He couldn't see a girl crying like Tsumiki was about to. He saw it in her huge glassy eyes, the way her nose was twitching, and the way her face seemed slightly flushed. Was she like this just for him? Feeling her shoulders tremble slightly, an indication that she was about to cry, he pulled her towards him. Despite the fact that he was still in pain and felt the impact of Tsumiki's body like a hammer blow, he held her tightly for several seconds. He kept his eyes fixed solely on the wall. He pretended not to hear her faint sobs, or that her robe was being soaked by those tears. I didn't want to pressure her. He slid his hands down and took hold of the girl's lower back. He tried to comfort her as she sobbed. I'm sorry. It's my fault you're like this. If you hadn't pushed me away. He stopped those words with a gesture. He pulled Tsumiki away from him again and looked at her. He looked into those enormous, shiny, tear-red eyes looking up at him, searching for something he could comfort her with. He tried to see into those tear-filled eyes. He didn't like seeing her cry, it didn't feel right, nor was it her style. But he couldn't do anything to stop her. If Tsumiki wanted to cry, how could he stop her? Listen, he slowly wiped the tears from her face. He cupped her face in one hand and wiped away every drop that fell down her cheeks with the other. You shouldn't cry. Not too much, at least. I'm fine, and you're fine. It's all over. Now you need to calm down a little, please. He cupped the girl's chin and pulled at her lips to give him a smile. Please. He tried to be cute. Every damn muscle in his face ached. But he tried for Tsumiki. Seeing her cry like she was now was breaking him from the inside out. Yeah? He repeated it again. Tsumiki closed her eyes. She sniffed. Since when had she not cried as much as this? Since her mother ran off with that man and left her with Megumi? She didn't know. Certainly, the memories were a blur in her mind. She remembered perfectly how her mother had once introduced her to Megumi's father. Soon they were married, and then they disappeared from her life, leaving her to cry, hugging her pillow. After that, she didn't allow herself to cry. Not just for herself, but for Megumi as well. She had to take care of a boy who was now her brother and not leave him to his fate like their parents had done to them. She was the older sister, and her duty was to protect her younger brother from all harm, including the pain of losing their father. And surprisingly, Megumi never showed any real pain for that loss, as if it didn't matter much to her. Although she knew that inside her brother there must be pain very well hidden, even from her. But still, I had to take care of him. Tsumiki opened her eyes when she felt him. Soft, warm. The light brush of Naruto's fingers against her chin, as he looked at her with concern, made her heart warm. Even her cheeks heated up when he smiled at her. Shit, she muttered. She rubbed her eyes hard, forcing the boy to stop petting her, to lower his arm. I want to, but I can't stop crying. Then, she felt it. First, it was warm hands cupping her face. Then, it was like a force pulling her closer. Finally, a light touch on her lips, fleeting and chaste. She thought she was dreaming it, imagining it. But when she could focus her vision, Naruto's face was right in front of her, inches away. And he was kissing her gently. Quickly, she pulled away, hearing a soft laugh. At least you've stopped crying, right? The blonde asked, pulling at his lips to give a huge smile in front of the girl's completely red face. Come on, don't look at me like that. I had to do something to make you stop crying. Tsumiki frowned. Her cheeks were hot. Her entire face was hot and it didn't look like it was going to go down anytime soon. But who could blame her? That kiss was completely unexpected. Lightly, she brushed her own lips. They felt warm, with a strange sensation that they were still being kissed. They. The boy moved. He didn't even know why. But he took the girl's hand and pulled her towards him. Tsumiki felt her face lightly hit Naruto's chest and didn't move. The shock, the nerve. Pum. See? He asked, letting his words tumble out like a cascade of warm water. He kept his eyes straight ahead, fixed on the wall. My heart is still pumping. It's pounding, pumping blood throughout my body, keeping me alive. Naruto moved his arm and wrapped his arms around Tsumiki, pulling her against his chest in a warm hug. You can stop crying. I'm fine. I'm healthy. I don't have any serious injuries and I was probably only kept unconscious by the blow. The pain I'm feeling now is because I can't see you cry, he admitted, lowering his tone. Please stop. If you really want me to be okay, stop crying. She listened to every word, every last one. She remained silent, holding back her responses, and when she could have spoken, she didn't. She felt her heart pounding in her chest. Her face was completely hot and red as a tomato. The words died before they even reached her lips. Lips that Naruto had kissed and through which no response could now come to those soft, warm words he directed at her. Everything died in his throat. Sumiki remained silent for approximately 10 minutes, thinking, trying to unravel the thoughts in her turbulent mind. During that time, Naruto remained completely silent. His eyes remained fixed on the wall, and he never stopped stroking the back of the girl in his arms, comforting her. He didn't want to see her cry, didn't want to see her face twist in sadness and pain, while she was bathed in pure, sincere tears. They maintained that silence. They enjoyed it. Oh. Naruto felt his face redden. Sumiki felt it even more. They looked toward the door, she still maintaining body contact with him, and saw Gojo Satoru's face peeking through the door. The camera flash accompanied him after they looked. "Aw, they're so cute. I'm sure Uchiha will take it too." Satoru quickly tapped the screen of his phone. The two teens knew then that that image would end up everywhere. "Who the buck is Uchiha? Don't buck with me, Satoru." "Gojo-kun." Satoru put the phone in the back pocket of his dark uniform and entered the room without even giving any importance to the fact that his godson and Sumiki were murdering him with their eyes. "I see you've recovered," it wasn't a question. The Jujutsu teacher took up position on the other side of the bed. "I'm glad." "Yes. I don't feel any pain, just general numbness and pain from not having moved in a while," he admitted, looking down at his own hands with some difficulty. Sumiki was on top of him. "But my hand." Now, Satoru called attention. He looked at Sumiki, and she understood. "Naruto-kun," he shifted his attention to the girl. "I'll leave you with Gojo-kun. I'm going out for a moment to check on Megumi." "Good." They remained silent. The sound of footsteps and the rustle of the sheet were the only sounds in the room, ending with the slam of the door closing. "What's up, Satoru?" Gojo Satoru put on a serious face. "It's time you knew about your story." 10. May. He looked critically at the enormous forest before him, its thickness commensurate, letting the sounds of animals and leaves rustling in the wind fill his ears. His godfather had finally told him everything, or at least why he took him on in the first place. He was an Onmyoji, a type of sorcerer, shaman, or exorcist who had existed hundreds of years ago within the so-called world of Jujutsu, or so his godfather had pointed out. But why was he an Onmyoji? It turned out that not only was he one, but his mother and all his maternal relatives before him had been. Uzumaki was a respected surname within the supernatural world for being from a line of Onmyoji who stayed on the good side of the empire. They were even paid for their services and then hidden away when people started to stop seeing spirits. Spirits? Well, these also existed. Gojo Satoru had mentioned that the term curses better suited the profession. It seemed that both sorcerers and Onmyoji had fought against the latter as they grew due to people's negative thoughts and feelings. And both flourished during the Heian era, when the king of curses was present and every negative feeling was present, making them much stronger. Hundreds, no, thousands, of sorcerers fought against both the king and the other curses. Now, in more modern times, sorcerers were rare. He accepted everything Gojo told him. If he thought about it calmly, it made sense. Since he was a child, when he was 4 or 5, he had seen strange beings lurking around his house or his school. He only finally saw them when his mother drew something on his forehead during one of the games they used to play when she was home. Gojo explained that it was a kind of seal that contained his cursed energy and made him invisible to the curses, while also denying him the ability to see them. But they never left and were always right in front of him. He was brought out of his train of thought when he heard his godfather's footsteps. He turned his head and looked at the Jujutsu teacher with an analytical eye. Gojo Satoru hadn't changed his attire at all. He was still wearing the dark sorcerer's robe he usually wore, and the blindfold completely covered his eyes. But this time, he glanced at the woman walking alongside his legal guardian. She was a woman with a statuesque body, concealed in a female sorcerer's uniform. Her feet, wrapped in brown boots, reminded him of the boots he'd seen before he'd fallen unconscious. Was that woman the one who had been fighting the curse until Saturo arrived? He couldn't say unless the woman herself told him. He moved his eyes. She had silver hair tinged with blue, which gave it a truly exotic look. Her fine, brown eyes were staring at him intensely, as if she were assessing him, as if she expected something from him. But he didn't move. All he did with that look was to launch a question of his own. "Ah, this place never changes." Satoru scratched his head after a full stretch like a cat. Even the other two thought they heard the man's bones crunch. Mount Kurama. It's a good place full of curses for an inexperienced young man to harness his energy and understand the world of Jujutsu. Or simply die. The woman stopped in her tracks and waved her cursed axe to present it to the youngest of the three. The boy looked at her, noticing how she seemed to exude cursed energy, though never at the level of his godfather. "You want me to train the brat in this place? Tell me again, Satoru. Why do I have to train him of all people? The elders put you in charge of the brat and you are his legal guardian." Satoru dismissed those words with his hand. Yes, he was Uzumaki Naruto's legal guardian. Yes, he was the strongest sorcerer in the world currently. But that didn't make him suitable for the boy's training right now. He had witnessed a bit and felt how the energy acted on the boy. Close combat would be his specialty, and while he was good at that, he couldn't hold a candle to the woman at his side. Meimei Saturo raised a finger. Between the two of us, who has the superior physical power and a better set of close-quarters combat skills? Without my own Mukujin unlimited curse technique, I don't surpass other Magi by too much. You, on the other hand, have taken physical power to supplement curse techniques that are lousy. Don't take offense. I stopped doing that a long time ago, the woman said, waving her hand as if she'd slapped a small mosquito. So that's it. You want the boy at a physical power comparable to mine. In a year? That's unlikely to happen, Saturo. Mama. I have faith in my dear godson. He placed a hand on the boy's head, ruffling his hair. Naruto sent a sharp glare at the Jujutsu master. I don't want you to push him to an excessive level. His curse technique will take care of the rest once you've exposed it to the boy. Curse technique? He tilted his head and crossed his arms before Meimei and Saturo's eyes. What's that? Is it like what you used against that guy with 1,000 eyes? Exactly. Saturo smiled. A curse technique is any sorcerer's weapon against curses. We use cursed energy and harness these techniques to defeat them. It was unfortunate that I used mine to repel that curse, but I was somewhat agitated at the time. The boy crossed his arms. If a curse technique was what he needed to remove the curses, what would his be? Saturo told him about all the known Onmyoji from his family and clan. Ashina, Mito, Nagato, and his own mother, Kushina. Each of them had developed their own curse technique to combat the curses. Ashina used her swords. Mito used her own strength. Nagato used a gravity curse. And his mother used the chains they were known for. So, what vengeful spirit cursed his family, and what curse technique did it leave them with? It was a mystery that not even his own godfather could decipher, or that he wouldn't tell him in the first place. Then that's what you need, Meimei placed the axe on her shoulder. She was paid to train the brat, and that was exactly what she was going to do. I'll bring out his curse technique by pitting him against the curses of the place. See curses? Hopefully you won't be fighting the king of the Tengu. Saturo showed a cheeky smile on his face. It is said that the legendary Minamoto no Yoshitsune, a general of the Minamoto clan, was trained on Mount Kurama, and it was none other than the king of the Tengu himself, Sajobo, who trained him in the art of the sword. The boy raised his eyebrow and looked directly at Saturo. Navy blue eyes against a blindfold as dark as night. Uzumaki then let out a sigh and pointed an accusing finger at the adult. Curses are one thing, but stupid children's tales told by old wives are another, he declared. I'm not that young, you arrogant idiot. My mother told me those stories. I'm not so gullible as to believe them or think they're real, even though curses do exist. Saturo snorted, a smile forming at his godson's outburst. He looked at him. He studied him. He was a young man of acceptable height for his age, with an athletic build. Kushina told him how the boy had been playing contact sports and how he had been one of the key players on her basketball team. She herself had sent him photographs of some of the boy's most important moments. Although he was upset by Kushina's death caused by one of the most annoying special grade curses they could find. If he had been there. He snorted and faced his godson with a smile on his face, still holding on to it. Oh, I thought you were a little baby just hatched, he said. His voice was filled with mockery. He didn't care that his godson was giving him an annoyed look, filled with an invisible pain against him. He also knew the brat's prankster side, as well as his ability to avoid being detected in any of his pranks. Saturo knew perfectly well that Kushina could capture him if she wanted to, and probably without breaking a sweat. That was the good thing about the mother knowing her son like the back of her hand. Will you do it, Meimei? You're asking that when you've already paid me? Meimei ruffled her braided hair with a flick of her hand. By the way, the fact that you're Gojo might be the reason you have so much money, right? You're spending too much on this job. Saturo hummed lightly. That's a total of 365 days in this forest, on one of my family's plots, Saturo scratched his neck. A whole year locked in this forest, without your little brother, who will still be at home waiting for his older sister. I know exactly how painful it is for you to be separated from him, so a bonus is absolutely necessary for that. Meimei savored the words of the legendary Gojo Saturo. Within the world of Jujutsu, the Gojo were the best of the sorcerer branches that existed, and with Saturo's appearance, the balance between sorcerers and curses had been established since birth. That's correct. 1 million yen. It's always too good to make deals with you, Saturo. The elders would be upset if they knew what you do behind their backs. Naruto listened to those words completely astonished. Saturo had paid Meimei 1 million yen to train him. Where did she get the money for it? Why was she wasting it on him? He frowned. He hated it when people wasted money on something idiotic like training, and that was a lot of money to spend a year in the forest on. He could take care of it himself and learn as he went. He was always good at it, and his teacher pushed his ability to improve himself, increasing his self-taught training in sports. Although he knew he had it in everything in general, being sharper in physical activities. He just needed a starting point. That was enough for him, and he could improve from there. Satoru, he looked at his godfather. What's this about you spending 1,000,000 yen on my training? That's crazy. Oh? Satoru blinked. When he understood his godson's words, he let out a light laugh. Relax, Chick-kun. My job as a jujutsu master brings in enough income to get me back on my feet in no time. I'm also a special grade sorcerer, so my pay is better. Add in that I'm a Gojo, who are one of the 3 clans. I have treasures that many shamans would covet or even dream of. I have enough money to waste on a game like this, Naruto-kun. The elders gave me the mission to prepare you for the world of jujutsu. According to my logical thinking, Mei is the best for your style of learning and improvement. Shall be able to exploit your abilities and achieve your family's curse technique, although the Uzumaki are truly strange. Satoru ruffled the teen's hair, earning a frowning Naruto under his hand. Don't worry about it. The old folks will end up paying for the expenses and the materials used. They're not stupid enough to have me on their bad side, and I don't even think you'll spend too much on materials. The entire forest is a material, along with the various lower grade curses there are. So, Uzumaki boy's sound of metal cutting through the air caught the boy's eyes. Naruto looked at the albino weapon in the sorceress's hands. Then he noticed the smile that formed on the woman's lips as she looked at him. I think this whole training camp is going to be hell. A year is too long for you to decide what to do with your life. Are you willing to take me to this forest? It will be hell. When Satoru-kun hires me for something, I usually go out of my way. He's a good benefactor and I can't let him down. The laugh escaped Satoru. Don't break it, Mei, the master looked at his godson. Are you willing to take that? You shouldn't even have to if you don't want to, and I can handle the old ones. Memories of Tsumiki crying flooded his mind. He was the one who caused that incident. He was the one who made the girl cry. He closed his hands and snorted. Throw me whatever you have, Mei-sensei. Mei just smiled. 11. Jujutsu. He spat out blood. He reset the bones in his body with one arm, his shoulder creaking slightly. He raised his face and looked at the corridor his body had formed in the forest, breaking branches, bushes, and trees as he moved forward. If his back hadn't collided with that enormous oak, he probably wouldn't have stopped until he ended up in some clearing in the forest and fell flat on his back. He could have several broken bones right now. That was the most likely outcome, and he wasn't even a doctor, but with the force Mei had used on him, broken bones were the least he could suffer. Luckily, he had dodged the blade of his master's cursed weapon, although he knew that if she had wanted to, his body would have been split in half right now. He coughed. Blood sprayed onto the ground. His lungs could have been pierced by shattered bones, and he felt blood rising in his throat. He used his right hand to pull himself to his feet, nearly falling back to the ground. His head was clouded with pain, and a veil prevented him from seeing Mei. Even his ears seemed dulled, completely cutting off all his senses except touch. He could still feel the earth beneath his hand, cold and damp, the grass brushing against his palm as he moved. Continuing to fight openly without using a curse technique would be the end of his cursed life. When Gojo Satoru finally left them, which happened 6 months ago, Mei kept her promise. His training would be complete hell. He believed he would only have to deal with simple physical training, sparring matches, and practical exercises related to confronting and understanding curses and cursed energy. He had never been so wrong. Of course, he would have to deal with curses and Mei. But it would all be in his time to survive. Mount Kurama had become a battlefield. On one side, he had the curses, whom he couldn't exterminate without a curse technique, and on the other, his hired teacher, whom he couldn't defeat in a direct confrontation until she awakened her curse technique or could use the cursed energy to a lesser extent. Because of this, he was completely screwed. He was the prey in both cases, and he was completely defenseless. His body, riddled with cuts, bruises, and broken bones beneath his skin, was a clear indication of his disadvantage against those who were hunting him. And Mei hadn't stopped hunting him from the very beginning. Didn't that woman need to rest or eat? Because he could barely stand on his feet. Worms and such had been his source of nutrition during those days, and now he was craving a huge bowl of ramen. The cracking sound alerted him. He turned his head and, out of inertia, moved his body away. He opened his eyes as the axe flew past him, completely destroying the tree that had been behind him. He skidded. He braked. He felt a hand placed on the back of his neck. Little one, Mei's breath on his neck made him bristle. It's time to rest. He moved. The boy moved his arm and pulled the woman's limb away from him. He stepped into his comfort zone and fired a punch with his right arm. He felt the woman's forearm stop his fist and smiled, showing his bloody teeth. This is really bothering me. Naruto clenched his fist until his knuckles turned white. No matter how much force he used, his teacher's limb didn't give an inch. He couldn't even force her back. I can't move you even a little. Oh, honey. You won't even be able to in that state. A burst of squawking sounded through the forest. The boy reacted by raising his hands as the birds attacked him, completely obscuring his perception and cutting off his vision, leaving him defenseless. Therefore, he didn't stop Mei Mei's fist when it buried itself in his stomach, causing him to double over and spit out more blood. Oh. Mei Mei didn't flinch. She stomped down, sending the force of her entire torso into the arm she used to strike the Uzumaki. Shifting her torso slightly, she threw the boy back several meters, forcing the blonde to stop his own retreat with his heels, landing next to the axe. Let's go. Naruto opened his eyes when he heard his master's footsteps. He moved his hands. He touched the handle of the weapon. He closed his fingers and pulled hard. With a crunch and a shower of splinters, Naruto swung the axe at its owner. Mei Mei brushed the splinters aside. Her eyes shifted and took in the cut against her. As a master of weapons, she sidestepped and entered from the opposite side of the boy, striking at his left rib, sinking her fist again. NGH. He felt his ribs give way as they rubbed against his insides. Naruto spat out another bit of his blood into a second pool and staggered until he was using his feet for support, panting with exertion. Good reflexes. Your legs move well, and you seem to have the strength to take my weapon. Mei Mei looked at her axe. She ran her tongue over her lips as she realized something. The boy was beginning to awaken his cursed energy. If that weren't happening, the teenager wouldn't have been able to take the weapon in his hands. It seems our extreme training is bringing something out of you, little boy. She pointed at the axe. Naruto looked at her in confusion. What was so special about that axe? He'd only grabbed the handle of the weapon and pulled it back in defense, knowing she'd move out of the way. What's so special about it? I just took it to try and beat you up a bit and even the score. A smile played on her lips as her eyes remained on her teacher's relaxed figure. It bothers me that there's such a difference, Mei-sensei. Mei Mei smiled. She liked the boy in a way. He was intelligent, skilled, and very persistent. Any other apprentice who had fought her without the necessary jujutsu knowledge would have ended up dead on the second day. And Naruto had been fighting her for 6 months, escaping curses. That was admirable and made the boy stand out among the students. Even the first years would have trouble doing what he was doing. Well, then you know what to do. Naruto clenched his hand at his side. He smiled as he felt Mei Mei's eyes on him and swung the axe in a horizontal motion. He twisted his body and, like an Olympic thrower, hurled the axe at the woman in front of him. The woman saw the weapon. She watched the axe flying toward her as if it were going to cut her down. If she didn't move, she would surely be split in two. But she only took a step to the right and moved her left arm. Firmly, she gripped the axe handle and slammed it into the ground to a complete stop, as if she had been a ballerina. Shit. No need to insult or get upset. Mei Mei looked at the boy from her position. With just a glance, she understood that the Uzumaki was in a sorry state. If they continued fighting, he would probably end up dead. A rest won't hurt. I am a first-grade sorceress, with years of experience under my belt. I've fought against special-grade curses and killed corrupted sorcerers who used interesting powers. You are fighting me without any tools, injured after 6 months of surviving in this forest where curses are present, and exhausted, eating only the insects you think you can eat along with some plants and nuts. You are not fully nourished. The spindles in your body are shattered. Probably one of your lungs is punctured or slightly torn. That you are still standing at all is something extremely surprising. And that pleases me in a way. I'm very persistent. Until I hit you at least once, I'm not going to let these legs give in, he smiled. Naruto looked into Mei Mei's brown eyes. He saw how she didn't seem bothered by it or show any emotion. And I'm going to achieve it. Ha! Mei Mei shouldered her cursed weapon. Well, if you are going to fight me like that, I should at least return the favor by fighting completely seriously. I hope y'all be careful and stay completely focused. I'm going to cut you in two at this rate, boy. The boy wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He kept his eyes on his teacher, who didn't move a single step as he prepared himself. He completely relaxed his body and waited for a reaction that didn't take long to come. Mei Mei moved against him and dragged the axe in her hands behind her. Shit. He snorted. He flexed his legs and prepared to jump to the side and evade his teacher's thrust. Crew. He opened his eyes and fluttered his arms. He growled through his teeth as the beaks of those dark birds began to attack him, holding him back until his summoner struck him down. But Mei Mei had already used that against him once, and he had learned something in those months. He stomped his foot on the ground, an aura surrounding him. He was concentrating cursed energy to scare away the animals. He shifted his torso and took his hand. He concentrated all that energy into his right fist. You're good. Mei Mei swung her axe at the same time the Uzumaki launched his fist. The limb collided forcefully with the cursed weapon, pushing its wielder back several meters. The force used in the blow was only intensified by the cursed energy itself. He gasped. He let his right leg give way and spat some blood at his feet again, this time splattering his own clothes. That was messed up, he declared with a smile, watching as his teacher began to recover from the blow. It hadn't even made a dent in the weapon. But that didn't even hurt you one bit. Not even your axe was hurt. Mei Mei moved her hand for her axe. She hadn't expected that direct blow from the teenager. After 6 months, the Uzumaki seemed to have learned something about cursed energy and seemed to use it in that direct blow against her. She was surprised by this and now understood what Saturo had mentioned. With no previous practice or understanding of cursed energy, curses, or curse techniques, the boy had overcome it all in just 6 months and managed to take a blow against her. Yes, he hadn't hit her and she collided with his axe. But a blow was a blow, and that was admirable. That boy, how much will he improve? She couldn't help but wonder, looking at the teenager. She almost thought she saw a second Gojo Saturo in front of her, or a Suguru Jido. Could that boy reach the special grade? She reacted when the wind stirred some of her strands. She watched as Naruto fell knee first onto her. Her eyes widened when she saw the cursed energy concentrating on that knee. At random. She jumped. She wasn't surprised when that knee hit the ground, creating a small crack in the floor, covering it with dust. She skidded and used the axe blade to spin, evading the teenager's hook. How had he moved so fast? Her body was just getting used to the cursed energy. I have it. She opened her eyes. Naruto stamped his right foot on the ground and swung his arm with a backhand strike. She raised her forearm. But she knew as soon as it touched the Uzumaki's skin that the blow was filled with an immense amount of cursed energy. So she wasn't surprised when she shot out and hit the ground. Cough. She spat out blood. Mei Mei roughly wielded the axe in her hands and smiled as she looked at the boy. Ha. Your way of using cursed energy is by intensifying your body. Shit. That blow was truly devastating and I feel like some of my ribs are shattered from the backhand you gave me. The woman stood up. She smiled, showing a bit of blood on the enamel of her teeth. From this point on, we can only solidify this curse technique of yours and it can only go further. It's time for the next level. He blinked. We're going curse hunting in this forest once you're well enough. Saturo paid me to train you and it's something I'm going to do very carefully, brat. Mei Mei smiled darkly. The boy felt a whiplash run down his spine. 8 months. 8 months locked in that enormous mountain, surrounded by curses, fighting to survive and take another step in his training as a sorcerer, had endowed him with much more savage animal-like senses. Since he understood how to use the cursed energy and how to form a curse technique with it, his training finally moved to the next level with 4 months left to complete the period the elders in charge had given them before entering a sorcery school. Slowly, he formed his own curse technique, learning to distribute the energy throughout every part of his body. Following his teacher's lessons and the information his godfather gave him while he was recovering, he was finally able to find a way to improve himself and be able to grow in the world he had been forced to live in because he knew perfectly well that he wouldn't be able to escape the world of Jujutsu once the elders had set their eyes on him. He knew it and so did Saturo and Mei Mei. That's why the woman kept training him and probably could have asked for more money for it after half a year of training. Would he have grown fond of her? He snorted. His torso completely marked by sweat and blood, he clenched both hands into fists. Orange energy appeared within seconds, concentrating. That was his power. He could manifest cursed energy and manipulate it in certain ways, thereby generating his own style for using his cursed intensifier style technique. He didn't know what to call it, but he knew it was a very versatile technique. He was surrounded by bloodied bodies that were slowly disappearing. Some of those bodies had humanoid shapes, others were half beast, half human, and still others didn't even look like registered living beings. Curses could take any form, and he'd been eliminating several of them for 2 months, taking Mei Mei's advice to heart to strengthen his own power and increase his control over the cursed energy. It was a stage of growth for him, one in which he could reach new heights in his career as a sorcerer, according to Mei Mei herself. He was right at the point where he could either be among the best or simply be another sorcerer who would end up killed in a confrontation. He heard a branch crack. He turned his head and wrinkled his nose, catching a completely human scent. And it wasn't exactly his teacher's. She smelled of lavender, and the scent that reached his nostrils was composed of shaving cream and sweat. Oh well, don't we have a little fella hunting for our dinner here? Kijajajaj. The man who spoke displayed a cruel smile. He was dark-skinned, with bulging eyes and a completely clean face. Naruto calmly looked at the adachi the man was holding and immediately deduced that he was a cursed weapon user. He moved his eyes to the other man. He was taller, unarmed, and muscular. They seemed to be complete opposites. While one was lean and flexible, the other was sturdy and tough. It didn't take a genius to see what skills each one specialized in. But anyway. The dark-haired man stopped a few feet from the Uzumaki. The latter smirked. He ran his dark eyes over the blonde's figure, studying the defined muscles in his torso. He almost whistled at the scars that seemed to be visible. We came to take some curses for our benefactor, and we see a brat taking our bread. That's no good. No, Nikki. We must take what he told us. Failing him would be no good. No, certainly not. The dark-haired man brought his hand to the handle of his adachi. He showed sharp teeth in an even sharper smile. Cursed energy began to converge on the sword. But he's just an inexperienced boy. Come on, Natsuo. See, Hatsuo. Hatsuo flexed his legs. He let air escape from his mouth as he refreshed it. He closed his fingers firmly around the dark handle of his prized sword and pushed himself toward the blonde as he drew the blade with a horizontal motion. What neither of the brothers knew was that he had trained with Mei Mei. The boy took only a step to the side. He didn't even look away to watch the blade slice through the air. He closed his fist and, with a simple backhand motion, sent Hatsuo tumbling backward, blood trickling down his chin. He smashed his nose. Aniki. That blade is less dangerous than Mei-sensei's. Naruto cracked his fingers as he flexed them slightly. She uses a powerful axe. That's just a chopstick. You bastard, Hatsuo wiped the blood with his hand, letting out a snarl. That kid not only destroyed his nose, but his upper lip as well. I'm not underestimating you anymore, kid. I'm going to turn you into a bucking sieve. That's good. Energy surrounded his fists, concentrating, resembling two well-formed spheres around both limbs. I think I'm going to kick you. Hatsuo charged. Natsuo followed, charging like an elephant. Naruto stepped on the ground and ran forward. He let Hatsuo pass, to his surprise, and braked a few meters from entering Natsuo's range. This is something I've been working on. He roared. He swung his right arm back and used his left hand to cover his right fist. Jijanken. GK Jijanken. Stone. Hatsuo looked over his shoulder. He opened his eyes when he saw his enemy, that boy, swing his fist, wrapped in cursed energy, and strike his brother directly with force. From his position, he felt the cursed energy escape from the boy they were trying to kill. Oh. Natsuo felt his bones move. He felt them being shattered, he even heard those very bones being pulverized by his enemy's blow. He spat out blood and, unable to stop, shot off into the trees. Hein, the Uzumaki moved his hand slightly. The residual energy still appeared between his fingers, disappearing like tiny lights, as if it were dissolving. Usually much nicer. I might have even introduced myself. A crack escaped as he moved his shoulder. But I've been in this bucking forest for 8 months, surrounded by curses, a sensei who almost killed me, talking to Tsumiki through the phone when I should be by her side, so I'm certainly annoyed. And the 4th degree curses can't contain my frustration anymore. I've gone almost a year without ramen. Hatsuo frowned. You're going to fight us over ramen? Ramen. You're such a strange wizard, kid. But we can't stop just because of one hit. Come on, Natsuo. A shadow fell over the young man. Strong, 2 arms fell like machetes on the blue-eyed youth. Dust and debris covered Natsuo's emerging figure as his older brother smiled. Aniki. Blood began to flow from the giant's torso. Turning his back, the young sorcerer's apprentice moved his middle and index fingers, forming a line of cursed energy that sliced through the dark sorcerer's torso. Jijanken. CH plus Jijanken. Scissors. Natsuo. The blade slicing through the air forced him to move his adachi. The clash of metal resonated and he was pushed back by his attacker's superior strength. Hatsuo shifted his eyes, meeting the blatant gaze of first-ranker sorceress Mei Mei upon him. I was waiting for my sweet apprentice to show up and when I looked for him, I found this. Mei Mei moved her arm encompassing all the dead curses and Natsuo's wounded body lying in a pool of his own blood. Curses and rogue sorcerers raised one of her eyebrows. When these two get together, it really gets too annoying. Mei Mei moved the axe, placing it on her shoulder. Behind her, Naruto kept his own technique active while he watched Natsuo try to get back on his feet, spilling even more blood onto the ground. Hatsuo looked at Mei Mei's feminine figure. As a sorcerer, he knew the woman's history and skill like he did with first-grade sorcerers. They all gained fame and created a history. If they weren't known, then they weren't good sorcerers in the world of Jujutsu. Hatsuo pulled back his adachi, showing the edge of his sword. He waited for his brother to get up. This has gotten a bit complicated. I didn't expect a sorceress like you to be inside this forest. It's truly unexpected, Mei Mei-san. Mei Mei raised one of her eyebrows, not out of surprise at being recognized, but because Hatsuo was openly stalling for time before them, so her brother could finally recover, something she found completely difficult. Her apprentice had struck a precise move, slicing through skin and muscle with a precise motion, as if he had used a sword. The blood dripping onto the ground at that moment made clear the young sorcerer's mobility. "It's good that you know me," then, he swung his cursed weapon, creating a light wind that stirred Hatsuo's hair. "Because then you'll see that you're not going to get out of this unscathed. Your brother has a serious wound on his torso caused by my dear apprentice. Well, what are you going to do? You're alone, and your benefactor won't send anything for an extraction on a mission that should be simple. Or am I wrong?" Hatsuo snorted. Mei's words were completely accurate in the current situation. Their employer wouldn't send anyone after them to rescue or assist them. This mission was a curse-collecting mission, a completely straightforward one. And it hadn't turned out to be simple at all, but rather far more complex than expected. "I must say you're right. I have no problem admitting it. However, if we retreat now, we'll be completely slaughtered. And that's something I don't want to go through. Neither does my brother. But your brother is now on the verge of death and you're not going to make it out of this forest completely unscathed. In fact, you won't even make it out unscathed on your own 2 feet." Hatsuo swung his adachi. Mei slid her hands down the handle of her axe and attacked with superior force, forcing the rogue sorcerer to flinch from the direct blow. The man grunted, feeling his arms tremble slightly. He was aware that he would not survive a direct confrontation. "It would be better to give up if it was really something I would do, damn it." The sound of metal ripping through cloth echoed through the forest. Hatsuo halted his advance, the adachi in his hand. He glanced at his sword, finding small pieces of dark cloth at the tip, along with something reddish. Had he managed to cut Mei a little? Would it have been a fatal wound that would have given him victory? Bidu Sudoreku bird strike. Hatsuo opened his eyes at that faint murmur. A few seconds later, he felt his body hit and a bird pierced him through and through, leaving a bloody hole in his torso that allowed the other two to see the other side. "Ah!" Cough. Metal clanged as the sword fell from the sorcerer's hand. Hatsuo felt his legs give way and he dropped to his knees. A trickle of blood trickled down his chin. This is another act within the world of Jujutsu, Naruto-kun. The young man looked at the scene. He was at Mei's side, watching as the last breath of life escaped from that man. "Dealing with those renegade sorcerers is a more bloody mission we must take. People like Gojo have no problem. He has a curse technique too perfect for any task within this world. He is the balance of this world." She turned her head towards the boy. "This is a step forward. If you are still standing, after killing the first person without suffering, it means that my work is well done." Once again, he stood there, watching with his blue eyes as the ball began to descend before raising his hand to catch it and toss it back into the clear sky. It was spring, and the sun was finally rising. From the right side of the door, he could hear the students filing out, chatting among themselves, and the faint chirping of birds was completely drowned out by the continuous sound of teenage voices. It had been a year and 2 months since he'd stood in that same position, waiting for the same person and performing the same action. He wrapped his fingers around the ball and turned his head when he heard a faint murmur that grew more into a voice. A voice filled with the energy, kindness, and caring he'd come to appreciate and, soon, need. In those 365 days that he had been in a forest, surrounded by curses and being pursued by a bloodthirsty sorceress, he also had certain gaps to maintain light conversations with a girl who was now walking towards him with slow, second steps and a smile adorning her face. Even if it was just a simple message. Even if it was just a single emoticon. He'd been willing to send just a letter if only he could receive the same thing from Fushiguro Tsumiki. The girl hadn't changed, not in his eyes. Beautiful, smiling, with her brown hair tied in a high ponytail that left her entire face exposed, Tsumiki was still one of the most beautiful girls he'd ever met. She was also the girl he'd given his first kiss to and with whom he'd been much more vulnerable. His godfather, Gojo Satoru, had also seen him at a very vulnerable moment but not as vulnerable as Tsumiki had been. She was a girl, and so far, after his mother, she had been the only one he'd ever confided in and cried with. He watched as Tsumiki stopped a few inches from him and raised her head. She had towered over the girl by several inches, her head jutting out above his own. He felt his muscles stretch. He was smiling, or trying to. "Hello. Hello." They awkwardly greeted each other. He laughed softly, trying to hide the nervousness that had crept into his voice in the form of an awkward greeting, almost a whisper. She lowered her head, hiding the slight blush on her face. This wasn't so easy given all the time they spent talking on the phone and the time they spent physically separated from each other. "How are you? I should have gone straight home to talk to Gojo. But I dared to come for you again, Tsumiki," she whispered, her voice audible only to her. She could see other girls pointing at them and giggling softly. From what she gathered, they were Tsumiki's friends and classmates. "I hope I didn't do something wrong." No, she quickly denied. She remained silent for a few seconds and considered her next words. She felt her cheeks burning and doing what she had planned wasn't easy. She worked hard to talk to Naruto about that kiss they had shared and those words they hadn't said. Tsumiki shook her head slightly. She'd decided all year long that she would confess her feelings to Naruto. So why was it proving difficult? She'd come to understand the boy better than Gojo or his brother Megumi, with whom Naruto barely seemed to interact until recently, according to his own brother. If she already knew him, why couldn't she just tell him what she wanted to tell him? The words wouldn't come out of her mouth and she could barely hear anything other than a constant pumping. The pumping. Tsumiki came to, emerging from the stupor caused by her own thoughts. She blinked several times and surrendered to the warm feeling that had begun to flow through her the moment she was wrapped in Naruto's arms. It was something warm and comforting that only grew stronger with the constant pumping of the Uzumaki's heart. He didn't want to leave that dream refuge and, strangely, he mustered up the courage to do so. Naruto lifted his head slightly and pushed his chest back several inches as Tsumiki separated her head from his chest. He stared at those two enormous dark orbs and waited for her to make a move. He knew he had to make a move, but which one? That was already escaping his mind, dulled by the image of Tsumiki in front of him. He couldn't move or even breathe. He was holding all the air in his lungs. Boy, Tsumiki. He didn't continue speaking. He felt Fushiguro Tsumiki's slender arms wrap around his neck and saw her rise up on her tiptoes to reach him. Seeing what she was doing, he could only bend down and capture her lips in a small kiss that lasted for a few seconds that, to both of them, seemed like hours. Hours in which they both enjoyed each other's warmth. Finally, it was Naruto who separated their lips. Just as he was the one who finally closed the distance, he was also the first to create it again. But with Tsumiki hanging from his neck and not bothered by being on her tiptoes. I've wanted to do this for a whole year. This time, it wasn't just an impulse. Tsumiki rested her head on the Uzumaki's chest. Taking her by the waist, he allowed her to fall to her feet, keeping her arms around his neck. Maybe just feeling you for a few seconds can give me the courage to kiss you again, this time without it being an accident. She didn't respond to those words. She remained completely silent, her eardrums rattling at the murmurs of the teenagers and the small sighs they were letting out. Were they a soap opera couple? She wrapped her arms around Tsumiki's waist and pulled her closer to her body, dropping her chin onto the top of the teenager's head. Time hasn't been kind to both of us, I must say, Naruto recalled the first kiss he and Tsumiki shared. It was in the hospital, shortly before he learned about the world around him, that everything that seemed like a dream or a nightmare was reality itself. With a forced year of study, this kiss has had to be postponed for too long, I suppose. Sorry for the delay. They both remained silent again. They enjoyed the closeness each other sent and the warmth of that embrace. Their story wasn't impressive. He was only attracted to her when she opened up completely and she was only attracted to that side of him that no one should know about. Click click. The two teenagers blinked several times at the unmistakable sound of the camera snapping pictures. Ah, young love. It's so beautiful and pure, isn't it, Megumi-kun? Gojo Saturo looked at his student and Tsumiki's younger brother, although not by blood. Fushiguro stood by his side with his hands in the pockets of his sweatpants. Like the first time Naruto saw the boy, Megumi was accompanied by the two wolves he saw the first time. Satoru. Slowly, the strongest shaman slipped his phone into the pocket of his dark uniform and gave his godson a cheeky smile. This was already a common occurrence for the Fushiguro brothers, but not for him. A year away from the three of them had completely forgotten his godfather's strange behavior, who only seemed to have intensified these same habits, given the smile he was returning. He frowned. Ma, don't frown so much. You're taking on such a constipated expression that it doesn't do you justice, Uzumaki-kun, the young teacher expressed, laughing slightly as his godson's frown deepened even further. He could already see those blue eyes turning into two ice daggers being thrown at him. If they were real, they wouldn't do anything to him. But since they were imaginary daggers, the thought was what counted. I knew I'd find you at Tsumiki-chan's school as soon as Mei told me you had returned from your forced study trip. Gojo's eyes, behind the blindfold, became appraising. So, how did it go? How about? A disturbance in the air let the shaman know his godson had attacked him. He felt nothing but the air moving, and his own infinity had saved him, unlike the tree right behind him. A crack later, the tree had fallen on a poor car, crushing it. The alarm began to blare shrilly. Do you know? Satoru didn't respond to the brief question. He kept his eyes on his godson at all times. He hadn't left Tsumiki's side at any point, nor had he shifted his weight unnecessarily to execute the movement. Did he use cursed energy? No, I don't sense any cursed energy in her coming from the environment. Everyone in the Jujutsu community knew about Mei's weakness, and what she'd done to remedy it had made her one of the best Jujutsu sorceresses currently available. It seemed she'd done an excellent job with Naruto. He thought she'd only help him understand the world a little more, teaching him some basic concepts in the process. But that didn't seem to be the case. She'd done much more than he'd expected, and he was excited to see what the boy was capable of. "Oh, of course I see it," Uzumaki-kuna's smile spread across the Gojo clan member's lips. "You split the tree behind me with a purely physical movement or almost. There's no cursed energy on the outside, but what about on the inside?" Placing his thumb on the edge of the bandage, he removed it with a slight gesture and let the teenagers see a bit of the blue color of his eyes. "Internally, the cursed energy is running through your body. Many sorcerers expel it, manifesting it. However, you do the opposite. It's interesting. I've never seen a similar case. It's going to be quite interesting, especially for the old mummies. Hahaha." When Saturo started laughing, the young men knew they had completely lost him. Tsumiki finally broke away from the blonde and looked at her brother. She found herself staring at that completely flat, emotionless face he'd displayed since childhood. Could her brother never show even a hint of joy or compassion? Every time she fought with someone, Megumi always ended up rejecting her, something that only seemed to intensify since Saturo came into their lives. Now, young people," finally recovering from his spontaneous fit of laughter, Saturo drew the three teenagers' attention to him, one of them much more interested. "Reunions are beautiful. Goodbyes are horrible. And it's time for one to happen right now." Two of the teenagers didn't understand the Jujutsu master's words. Gently, Naruto broke away from Tsumiki's embrace and took her hands in his own, placing a chaste kiss on the backs of them. "I'm sorry, Tsumiki-chan. I have to go with Gojo to the wizarding school like he promised. I promise I'll come see you and call you when I can. I'm sorry." Tsumiki didn't let him speak. She pushed herself up and slightly lifted herself to silence the boy's words with a light brief kiss, but full of warmth and affection. "Shut up," she whispered, her cheeks flushed. "Just shut up and do what you're saying. I want actions, not facts." Saturo crouched down beside Megumi. "See? That's how you should act, Megumi-kun." Naruto leaned down and cupped Tsumiki's face in his right hand. "I promise." "You do it." "I do." And he kissed her again. Accompanied by his godfather, the young new Jujutsu student observed the Tokyo Metropolitan Magic Technical College with his blue eyes, studying the entire structure completely. Unsurprisingly, the school maintained an appearance from the Japanese feudal era, diverting any visitor from any questions that might have come to mind. In the eyes of anyone, that school was just another relic guarded by the monks and kept safe by the government, being in fact a school where shaman students learned everything about cursed energy and the world of Jujutsu, as Gojo had pointed out to him several times during his previous training. Within those walls and that grounds, young members of different sorcerer clans were prepared for life within a supernatural world. He himself was now a member of the fourth clan known as the Uzumaki, an extinct Onmyoji clan that was exterminated in the past, except for his mother's branch, who finally died in the hospital a year and 2 months ago. But the memory of his mother's death still fresh and his training under the tutelage of Mei, a money-loving sorceress, and his younger brother, he walked towards the entrance of the main building, following in the footsteps of Gojo Saturo, his tutor, godfather, and teacher, as well as the main sorcerer within that strange world that surrounded them. And why was he the main sorcerer? From what Mei explained to him, the Gojo family was always a linchpin within the world of Jujutsu due to the curse that fell upon them. Mukujin. Due to this curse that fell upon the Gojos, they assumed the role of balance within the supernatural world that surrounded them, their presence being an important barrier to overcome against any curse that truly wanted to harm the human world. But the arrival of Saturo, the last surviving Gojo, and his strong connection and understanding of his family's curse, the balance had found an important protector that no one, not even some special class curses, would think of breaking, with Saturo completely unharmed and alive. Mei made this clear to them several times during their training. Once Saturo was gone from the world, the curses would descend upon them in droves, and they would have to work even harder to contain them. Countless of them were waiting to see the fall of the great Gojo Saturo, and they wouldn't hold back when he finally disappeared. "Here we are." The young student stopped his internal tirade. He looked around, finding themselves in a very large room, with thick wooden pillars holding the upper corridors and the tower's tall structure completely firm. There weren't a single crack at first glance, and it didn't seem like the structure was going to give way. For a place with such an immense history, probably dating back to the Heian era, it was remarkably well preserved. "Is this school?" he asked, pulling the strap of his backpack over his shoulder. At his godfather's urging, he set aside his casual clothes and took one of the wizard uniforms he handed him, finding this one with a dark orange hood and orange sneakers, forgoing his usual black shoes. "I'd say it's impressive. Isn't that right?" Saturo laughed slightly when he saw his godson's surprised face. As was customary with rookies, his thoughts were always misguided when they saw the interior of that immense Heian-era building, and they were left just like the boy next to him. Wide-eyed and mouth agape. "Naruto, this is the Tokyo Metropolitan Technical College of Magic. For 4 years, you will be trained in the arts of jujutsu, which you must implement to keep people safe from curses. The young man's voice became somewhat deeper. It's not a game to play and win. It's real life. May, I suppose, explain to you. Satoru-kun, Naruto patted his godfather on the shoulder and gave the haired man a defiant smile. I know what you're going to say, or what you're trying to say. I was the one who fought those 2 strange rogue exorcists, and I was the one who killed at least one of them. I went through the duel with Mei-sensei's help, and I have no regrets. My parents did this, and I can do it too. I'm not so weak that a little blood will break me. I also understand the implications of everything, and I'm standing my ground, okay? You've got a tough guy there, Satoru-kun. Satoru scratched his neck a little and turned his head toward the voice. A man was sitting and watching the two of them, his eyes hidden behind thick dark sunglasses. He didn't show a smile or a gesture of appreciation, either at Gojo's presence or at the Uzumaki's words. Principal Yaga, Satoru recognized the man. The albino stared at the stuffed animal the principal was holding for a few seconds before looking back at the man. This is Uzumaki Naruto. It really is a pleasure to meet someone descended from Kushina-san. The headmaster put aside the stuffed animal he had been sewing. Behind his dark glasses, narrowed eyes watched the teenager with a truly calculating gaze, studying every small movement from the boy. It seems that Satoru did what the elders indicated, at least for once in his life. Hearing the rebuke in the man's voice, the Uzumaki looked at his godfather. Contrary to his expectation, Satoru didn't seem surprised by the man's words or embarrassed for not normally following the rules. Being who he was, they couldn't impose any kind of regulation or control on him that would keep him on a thin leash. Naruto scratched one of his cheeks. Masamichi Yaga watched the teenager's movements and began to stand up when he noticed the boy's nervousness. You're the principal, aren't you? So what do I have to? Soon, an itch hit him, like a strange sensation. He twisted his body and wrapped his hands in cursed energy, punching a shadow that charged at him, sending the attacking plushie flying into one of the thick massive wooden pillars. With narrowed eyes, Naruto watched the headmaster. Just because Satoru and the elders want you here doesn't mean I do, Uzumaki. Yaga crossed her arms over her torso. Without a gesture, the school's headmaster stood rooted to the spot as he watched the future apprentice react. What do you hope to achieve as a shaman? Why do you want to enter the school? Fame? Power? Money? Very few of the shamans live to a very old age, which is why we have so few elders and why we value their advice and training, even though your godfather hasn't told you otherwise. Or am I wrong, Satoru? Before Satoru could respond, the figure of his godson stood between the two adults. Naruto was being pushed around by a small stuffed animal, though it was worth noting that it was the same one he'd hit with a direct attack and it withstood his punch as if it were made of some truly durable material. As Yaga mentioned. Naruto dodged a blow and watched as this plush bounced like a ball. My cursed technique. Jugai cursed body is the puppet manipulation technique. You'll have to fight with Cassie until you answer my questions, Uzumaki-san. What if I destroy your puppet? Naruto swung his leg and kicked the ball that was Cassie. The puppet shot toward Principal Yaga. The man moved his head with a small jerk and Cassie shot back toward the blonde. I hope you're not mad. I highly doubt that. He opened his eyes. Naruto watched Cassie's constant movements and jumped back as the puppet fell on him from the top of the roof, which was high enough for Cassie to become a completely lethal projectile. I doubt you can. Still, what is your answer? I see your point. You're an Onmyoji, and Uzumaki no less. You're all supposed to be dead, the last being your mother. Yet Kushina kept you hidden from the elders and created a history where you were supposed to have no cursed energy, that you'd be of no use in jujutsu. Yaga watched the teen's fluid movements. She fixed her eyes on the boy's leg movements and how he perfectly evaded Cassie's attempted strikes. And now you're forced to be with us. Still, I won't send you on missions or give you training unless you're to my liking. Now, boy. The crack echoed through the room. Using his right hand and enveloping it in a whitish energy, Naruto slammed Cassie into the ground, using a little force, but not all of it. The floor cracked, and splinters flew. I don't give a shit about the elderly. I don't give a shit about being an Onmyoji or an Uzumaki, he lifted his face. 2 blue orbs observed the figure of Masamichi Yaga standing several meters away from where he stood. It's my life and I will use it as I wish. Naruto pulled his hand back. Looking frayed, Cassie stumbled, trying to launch herself again. The energy shifted, and with a direct blow, Naruto sent the puppet hurtling toward the headmaster. Yaga saw this and raised her hand, catching her puppet with her right hand. I desire to be a shamano, more like being forced to be Anu and change my way of seeing things. Whether I'm a shaman, an Onmyoji, an exorcist, or a sorcerer won't stop me from acting according to my own means and rules. He stabbed his thumb directly into his chest. I am the one in charge of my life, whether I'm a shaman or not. Why am I here? Obligation. Why am I here? To keep people outside the supernatural world completely safe. That is my goal, and that is what I will do. Asamichi Yaga released Cassie, and the puppet bounced slightly until it lay completely on the ground. The director stopped the flow of cursed energy through the puppet and began walking toward the teenager. Naruto closed his hands and clenched them until his knuckles turned white. An iron will and a mind that hasn't wavered since you entered the room. You've ignored Gojo Saturo and focused on me, your enemy. Yaga stopped in her tracks, standing in the center of the room, 3 meters away from the Uzumaki. That's not something you find much these days. You're firm with your words, but will you remain that way once your training begins? People die in this line of work. You'll see your comrades die, and you could see someone close to you, like your mother. What's to ensure you won't break? What's to ensure you'll maintain this steadiness? That's what worries me, boy. Will you be able to hold on once you see what Jujutsu really is? Yaga, Saturo intervened, stopping his godson's words from coming out. Naruto has killed and he's still standing. He's seen death and he's still standing. He's suffered the death of his mother and he's still standing. He spoke with confident words, letting them reach Yaga's ears. Mei must have told you about the incident with the dark shamans. Well, Naruto killed one of them. Mei has trained him well for a year to be a shaman. Yaga narrowed his eyes at the strongest shaman. As much as he didn't want to allow it, the pressure from above would end with him giving in to the request for the last Uzumaki to enter the school to become a shaman. It was an undeniable fact that the boy would become one, even if he himself didn't want to. He could only give in to what he had seen and give the boy a position within his school. There was nothing he could do but follow orders and allow the boy to be there. But Yaga took a deep breath. Though she didn't like to admit it, not openly, the boy had already passed her test with that determination he showed when he spoke. Introduce him to his classmates. Have Maki accompany him on a tour of the school. 15. First year. Standing in front of a sliding door, the new student at Tokyo Metropolitan Magic Technical College waited for his teacher and godfather to call him inside. Half an hour ago, he fought a stuffed animal that moved with cursed energy and convinced a harsh principal and shaman to attend that class, even though he knew from Saturo that he was obligated to attend, even though Principal Yaga had objected. No one could overturn decisions like that made by the elders, not even Gojo Saturo, and it was something his godfather reinforced in his mind on the ride to school, so he wouldn't make a fool of himself. Saturo might have expected him to act like his mother, but he wasn't as explosive as his mother. He had traded his casual clothes for the school's signature uniform. A black jacket and black pants. The only things that stood out about him were the dark orange hood attached to his jacket and the matching orange sneakers that replaced the dark uniform shoes. From what Yaga told her, it was Saturo who had prepared his uniform over the past year for when he would attend school with the rest of the young shamans, who weren't that many. Saturo told her that there were currently only about 4 first-year students, not counting him, with one addition just before himself. And if he was honest, he was eager to meet his companions. He had to emphasize that word because he didn't blindly trust the shamans of Tokyo. Except for Saturo and Yaga himself, everyone else was in his notebook of untrustworthy people, given what had happened during his training. How many shamans would end up turning rogue as well? Who was pulling the strings behind all the Jujutsu renegades? These were questions he asked himself for a few months after the confrontation with those men. I hope they wouldn't go after anyone unfamiliar with Jujutsu, like Tsumiki was. Cracking his neck a little, he blinked as the door finally began to move and Gojo Satoru's face appeared through the crack, revealing a white blindfold covering his eyes, replacing the black one she'd seen him with or the sunglasses he usually wore when he wasn't taking the world's strongest shaman pose. Good thing you didn't move. I like it when students listen to me. Sadras' arm moved and soon his hand was thrashing his godson's head as if he were a mere dog. The boy narrowed his eyes and waited while the older man gloated. Come. I'll introduce you to your awesome classmates. When Gojo Satoru yanked the door open, Naruto saw the current first-year Jujutsu students. 2 boys, a girl and a panda. The teenager blinked several times, trying to process the sight. Is that the new student, Gojo-sensei? Panda rose from his seat and walked toward Naruto with heavy steps, as if he were an animal that had just begun to walk bipedally. The enormous mammal loomed over the slightly shorter Uzumaki and stared at him intensely for several seconds. Naruto looked back. I'm Panda, a panda, he introduced himself, taking Naruto's right hand in a firm grip. The blonde moaned slightly at the squeeze and remained completely firm. Nice to meet you. Uzumaki Naruto. I'm not a panda. Well, I can see that, Panda said, scratching the back of his neck with one of his paws, creating a slight rubbing sound that seemed strange to the Onmyoji. But he wasn't going to mention them. Come on, let's introduce you to the others. Before Naruto could raise any objections, he was dragged into the classroom by Panda, his new classmate. Well, he had expected strange things in a world filled with curses, what he didn't expect to see was a talking panda walking on its hind legs. Was it a summon or something? It would be the only thing that would be acceptable in his textbook. This is Inumaki Toge. He's not very talkative because of his curse, but he's a good person. Panda pointed to a young man with messy white hair and purple eyes. A green scarf covered his mouth, preventing her from seeing his face properly. Tsunameo Inumaki moved his fingers slightly, his thumb and pinky, as if he were at some kind of concert. He's just saying hello, Panda said again, moving on to the next student. He's our new student from before you. Akatsuki. He's a bit shy but kind and has Maki-san's full attention, Panda said with firm words, not noticing how the only female in the group was looking at him. Instead, Naruto laughed lightly, sensing the danger around Panda. Hello, Uzumaki-san. Naruto looked at the teenager in the white jacket. Akatsuki was a young man with messy black hair and a slim build. Unlike Inumaki, Akatsu was taller than him and could, perhaps, rival Naruto in height from what he could see. It wasn't like he was trying to be the tallest or anything like that anyway. It's a pleasure, Akatsu-san. He accepted the young man's hand with a smile. And finally, Zen and Maki, our young prom. Ham. Crack. Naruto jumped from the blow, watching alongside Inumaki and Akatsu as Maki directly hit Panda with a strong punch. The girl, with greenish-black hair tied in a ponytail, removed her fist from Panda's head to readjust the glasses she had over her brown eyes. Idiot, Maki closed her hand and crossed her arms under her chest. With sharp eyes, the student stared at the downed Panda as if she expected him to burst into intense, hellish flames. Don't you ever call me Zenin again or mention that I have an interest in Akatsu-san. He'll kick you right back if you mention it. Hi, boss. Naruto leaned towards Yuta, arms crossed over his chest. Is he usually like this? I mean, he seems fierce. Well, I haven't been here long, Akatsu admitted, sounding embarrassed. But she's training me in swordplay. The Uzumaki looked at the object Akatsu Yuta was carrying slung over his shoulder. It was elongated and wrapped in a small pitch-black cloth. It could definitely be a sword. Recalling Mei-Mei's words, in the world of Jujutsu, weapons imbued with cursed energy existed. These weapons were truly rare and expensive, including small daggers that could be worth millions of yen and possessing devastating power that would erase curses or shamans from the world. But again, those weapons were with the Zenin. Being part of the three clans granted them status and benefits, and the Zenin were always wielders of cursed weapons, and because of this, the clan acquired most of the world's cursed weapons. It's a pleasure, Uzumaki-san. Maki adjusted her glasses on her face and looked at the new student as she had Akatsu Yuta days before, sizing him up. Most of the first-year students were members of shaman clans, except for Panda, who was a creation of the headmaster. It wasn't normal for people outside of Jujutsu to enter the school. Do you have any training in? Mei-sensei trained me in Jujutsu and cursed energy, he replied quickly. Naruto blushed in embarrassment and scratched the back of his neck when he realized he'd cut Maki. I'm sorry about that. Maki shook her head. No need to apologize. It's good to know you were trained by a sorcerer before entering the school, she murmured back, looking into the Onmyoji's intense blue eyes. That will make my explanations easier. Am I still in charge of the tour, Satoru-sensei? Gojo Saturo looked up from the magazine he was reading. Sitting in his teacher's chair with his feet up on the desk, the world's strongest shaman had relaxed a bit before talking to his students or continuing the class they'd interrupted the day before. Oh? What? Satoru blinked behind his blindfold, a gesture his students couldn't appreciate. Of course, Maki-san. You'll be in charge of guiding Naruto-kun around the school. Thank you, Satoru-sensei. The students kept their eyes on their teacher for a few more seconds until the white-haired man returned his attention to his precious magazine. We won't get anything else from him, will we? Naruto scratched the back of his neck and shrugged. He was used to his godfather's eccentricities, and this was something he had truly expected. I'll follow the path you lead. Maki nodded at Naruto's words. She glanced at the teacher and sighed inwardly. Why did Satoru have to be so laid back? He was practically the strongest shaman thanks to Mugen, and he acted completely unlike someone of his stature. There was no arrogance or worry in Gojo Satoru's mind, and everyone around him knew it. Fine. Uzumaki-san, come with me. I'll give you the regular tour of the school, Maki said, sending a subtle glance to Satoru. However, the man kept his attention completely on his magazine, searching through it for the next bun shop to rob when he was sent on a mission. The four teenagers and Panda left the first-year classroom and began walking through the school hallways. Naruto looked around and up, staring in disbelief at how far the ceiling seemed from where they were standing. I was surprised too. Akatsu Yuta began to speak. His voice came out muffled, filled with tiny crackles that indicated his nervousness at talking to a stranger. However, Naruto didn't sneer like anyone else would have and listened patiently. How long have you been here? A week or so. Thinking back, he recalled an incident that had happened some time ago and that Mei had told him about. A week and a half ago, a young man in high school had attacked his classmates, again, without really meaning to. Apparently, that day, a truly dangerous special grade curse had appeared and he was placed in the custody of Gojo Satoru. It seemed that Akatsuki was somehow linked to that curse, which is why he was with them in class. What were the elders thinking? Would they use him as another weapon? He narrowed his eyes at the unasked question. And you? Maki intervened in the conversation between her two newest classmates. Knowing Yuta's background, it was now her turn to learn about the newest member of the class. Why did you enroll at the Tokyo Jujutsu School? He put a finger to his chin. Why did he enter the Jujutsu School? Why was he a sorcerer, a shaman? Those questions were easy to answer. Out of obligation. However, he wasn't going to tell them his entire life story. Maki, who was looking at him with interest in the information he was about to share, was probably a member of a clan and would know how he felt about being a shaman out of obligation. Gojo-sensei is my godfather. Ah. Gojo-sensei. Gojo like Gojo Satoru Panda asked, bringing his right paw to his mouth. As everyone knew, the Gojo clan had been destroyed a few years ago, or rather, it was diminished by the slim chance of the descendants of the same clan awakening the curse technique, leaving only 2 members of the clan. Gojo Satoru's parents. When Satoru inherited his family's ancestral power, a power that was much greater in him, only the young heir Gojo remained as a member of the clan, placing it in a poor position compared to the other 2 great clans of the time. When the news that Gojo Satoru had a godson reached the young sorcerers, they could not contain their astonishment, except of course for Akatsuki himself, who was bewildered by the expressions of his companions. Why do you have those faces? They do it because Gojo Satoru doesn't have any family, he lowered his voice. Naruto's expression changed to a slightly serious one. Even his smile tightened. That's why they're surprised I have a godson. But anyway, my parents were shamans before I was born, so they met Gojo-sensei during their time as students and thought it would be a good idea for him to be my godfather. He shrugged at the explanation. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's not very relevant. Inuyamaki, Panda, and Maki were completely at odds. The news that Uzumaki Naruto was Gojo Satoru's godson could undoubtedly change the world of Jujutsu. 16. Jito Suguru. He took a deep breath. He felt beads of sweat falling down his face. He looked at his opponent as he moved his feet to follow that continuous circle. Patiently, he waited for his opponent to charge at him. That was his current objective. To wait. To wait for the boy in front of him to launch a direct attack. They had already played that game in the week since he entered the Tokyo Metropolitan Magic Technical College, always following the same steps and performing the same actions each time, only varying their intensity and speed to correspond with the improvement of his training. There wasn't much to report about his time at the school. The teachers were always straightforward. Either you learned everything or you died on the battlefield. It was a given that information was crucial, along with training, and he put his mind to work, absorbing everything he could about Jujutsu before launching himself into a fight again. Always counting on Gojo Satoru or Mei wasn't on his agenda. The only important thing during that time were his moments completely free from any assignment as a shaman, which he used to travel to Gojo Satoru's house to meet Fushiguro Tsumiki, the older sister of Megumi, the shadow boy. The 2 of them began a relationship, if it could even be called a relationship. He didn't know how to classify what they were yet, but he liked Tsumiki and she seemed to like him, so everything indicated that they were boyfriend and girlfriend at best, although neither of them ever talked about being a formal couple, but things led to that. Tsumiki didn't seem concerned that he was a sorcerer, a shaman, or an Onmyoji, the term was in the air. She was supporting him from afar. She always sent him messages of support, called him at night, and expressed concern for him, and he did the same for her. If he didn't get a response from Tsumiki herself, he could always rely on Megumi for information, though the boy was often reluctant. He looked like a stick had been pierced through and through. He shifted his weight to his lower body, to his legs. He flexed them as he walked in circles, like a dog facing someone trying to enter its territory. He stopped his movement at the same time as his opponent. He looked at the gleam of the blade, like the incident sun, creating a flash of yellowish light that made him squint for a few seconds. And it was in those seconds that he received the attack. He heard the whistling of steel cutting through the air. Out of inertia, he swung his staff against the sword, generating a clang of metal that buzzed in his eardrums for several seconds. He then forced his eyes open, watching as his enemy now launched a stab at his chest. He responded by placing his cane in the middle. He felt the force behind the attack and was pushed back a few meters. Yuta has improved under Maki-san's eye. Akatsuki stood barely 5 meters away from him, breathing heavily, thick beads of sweat running down his face. His usually dark and unruly hair now fell over his forehead, completely damp with sweat, slightly covering some of his dark eyes. He tried to get through me. He tightened his fingers on his cane, straining at it. He let the air escape from his mouth as he sighed, his shoulders slumping in the process. Unlike Yuta, he had opted for a black tank top and dark orange knee-length pants, with black and orange sneakers for footwear. Two thick wristbands adorned his arms. That went very well, Akatsu. In the stands of that sports field, the other first-year students watched. He looked first at Panda, the panda, a creation of Principal Yaga, the pinnacle of his power. Then he looked at Inumaki, the boy with a vocabulary full of sushi ingredients, for which he had yet to find a meaning. And finally, he looked at Maki, the first-year cursed weapon user. He let out his breath, making a hissing sound. Yuta. He swung his bow staff at the dark-haired youth. Blue eyes met the first-year student's dark ones. Before Yuta could respond, a smile spread across his lips. That was good. And he lowered his cane as a sign of completion. While he was much more suited to hand-to-hand combat using his cursed energy for it, learning how to use a weapon could benefit him in the future, especially if he faced a cursed weapon user like Maki. Thank you Naruto-san. He twisted his lips into a slight smile. Swinging his iron bow staff, he walked toward his fellow student and placed his right hand on the boy's shoulder. Don't be thankful. We're partners, aren't we? Akatsu Yuta nodded and showed a genuine smile. Naruto would admit that the boy truly was a good person and a hard worker. He had been cursed with a curse like the one that trapped him, and he had still carried on with all his might. What could he possibly say about Akatsu Yuta other than kind words and thoughts about him? He patted his companion on the shoulder. Shall we keep training? Or do you want to? But the words died. Intense, dark, and sinister, a cursed energy had appeared within the school's boundaries, making its position clear. Uzumaki Naruto nodded toward a figure advancing swiftly toward them, streaking across the sky with intensity. He narrowed his eyes and tightened his grip on his bow. Who was the guy on that curse? He could tell he wasn't a Zenin with a shadow technique because the only user he knew was Megumi, his godfather's protege. It was thanks to Gojo that he learned about Megumi's abilities and what the future held for her. That. Frus. With a flutter of wings, the bird-shaped curse landed in front of the two teenagers. Their companions noticed and began to move just as a man jumped out of the curse. Hello. He took one step, then another. He displayed a calm, relaxed smile as his eyes focused solely on one person. Akatsu Yuta, the boy with the special curse who had appeared a while back, one that might come in handy with his event about to begin. He'd had members of his group collecting curses, both in and out of the city, and now he could pick out one that was truly interesting to him. Akatsu Yuta no. And he looked at the boy. Thin, with a nervous smile, the boy was scum, a mere tool to him. With the stupid apes that were humans swarming around the world, he would use every tool within his reach. SC. Jito Suguru is my name, kid. He made his smile soft, calm, and as sincere as possible. He wasn't showing who he really was. Soon, the most experienced shamans would enter the area and his time would be up. But he had come to give a warning anyway. It's a pleasure to meet someone special like you, Akatsu-san. He tried to take a step, but a figure stood in his way. With piercing, ice-blue eyes, Jito had to watch as a freshman interrupted his motivational speech. Why couldn't he just carry out his plan and be done with it all? He pressed his lips together. Hey, you disgusting monkey. If I were you, I wouldn't dare. Feeling an itch, he was forced to move as the staff tried to strike him. He jumped several meters, separating Akatsu and his attacker. You know, scratching his cheek, Naruto squinted at Jito Suguru's figure. You suck too much, man. Jito narrowed his eyes. Did he stink? Him? Did he stink? He snorted through his teeth, a thin line on his lip showing how irritated he was. Boy. I wouldn't use words like that. I won't take kindly to someone inferior, a filthy monkey like you, insulting me. He waved his arms. The long sleeves of his kimono fluttered slightly, revealing white skin. Or I'll be forced to end this meeting with a death or two before the old folks show up. Naruto raised his right eyebrow and placed the bow on his shoulder. Had he threatened him? Had he threatened them? He twisted his lips into a mocking sneer, showing confidence before Jito's hurtful eyes. Yeah, well, I'm going to gut you if you make a move, man. He put on his best predatory expression. He had to openly admit that he enjoyed Jito's gesture, how his eyebrows dropped into an annoyed frown, and how his eyes became even darker than before. But why mock? It was much more fun to watch the man's effort not to kill them all in that place. Yeah, she admitted, that guy didn't give her good vibes. Ever since she felt his cursed energy and his aura, she couldn't just let him go. Something was wrong with that guy, and if she let him play his game, everyone would probably get hurt. You're too predictable, monkey, Jito clasped his hands together. Dark eyes narrowed as they stared at Naruto's figure. You could never understand what I'm planning, all the great things I can do for the world. The world that understands Jujutsu would be wonderful. Those who can't see the cursed energy, who don't possess it within their bodies, must simply be erased from the world. Naruto gritted his teeth into a tight smile. Sumiki entered those people in a way. She was susceptible to paranormal things, however, she couldn't use cursed energy. She understood and knew about the world he and Megumi were in. However, she couldn't be with them in that world. It wasn't her world to be in, and that was something everyone understood. If those words put Sumiki in danger. Make everyone aware of curses and the. When the school teachers arrived and Jito's classmates appeared, both sides watched as the former Jujutsu shaman was embedded in the ground, with blood running down his chin, dripping from his nose, and his curses were exercised around the area, these being of the 4th degree. Crump. He flexed his fingers. He cracked his knuckles and looked at the man. Jito Suguru had slowly begun to stand up, one hand wiping his blood-spattered chin. His dark eyes never left his, and that arrogant smile had vanished from his face. What? Naruto slowly lowered his bow staff. Icy eyes collided with the enemy's piercing black orbs. If you keep going down that path, I'm going to finish you off, old man. To everyone's surprise, the enemy shaman's face returned to its usual mask of calm. His eyes formed 2 slits in his sharp face, and his mouth twisted into a calm smile that everyone could see. There were no cracks in that mask, and despite the blood running down his face, Jito remained calm. That hurt. A crushing blow, if I may say so. He moved his arm slightly. Making a furrow with both limbs, he pointed at all the 4th degree curses exercised by the blonde. Excellent work. And your name is? Uzumaki Naruto. Jito Suguru slowly opened his eyes. He had heard of an Uzumaki, only one. But she had died and left no offspring. He examined the boy's face, his body and skin tone. Through narrowed eyes, he looked into the teenager's blue eyes, and everything fell into place for him. Son of Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato, Hajito clasped his hands in a light clap that echoed throughout the field. His followers and the school faculty finally woke from their reverie. It's a shame we're both on the opposite side, Uzumaki. He turned his face. He smiled at the confused Akatsuki. And my boy. What will you do? Which side will you choose? Stay away from my students, Jito. Everyone shifted and looked at the young man. Suddenly, Yuta clenched his hands and felt the weight of being the center of attention. He preferred Naruto to be the center of attention. He liked being in the shadows, not being watched by all those people. Her thoughts were cut short when a hand fell on her shoulder and blue eyes entered the scene, followed by a soft smile. Yuta. We're with you. She took a deep breath. She pulled away from Naruto's hand and walked toward Jito Suguru with a determined stride, a look of determination on her face. That man had insulted her friends and wanted to hurt them. She wasn't going to allow that. I'm not going with you. What? Don't you? I'm not going with you. Yuta clenched his hand against his chest. Black locks of hair fluttered as he raised his face, looking into Jito's shocked eyes. I'm not going to follow someone who hurts my friends. I'm not going to be your weapon. Silence fell over the room. Yuta took deep ragged breaths. He was recovering from that scream and processing the words he'd said without thinking too much. A ha-ha loud laughter escaped Jito Suguru's throat. A second later, he looked at all the shamans and showed a cruel and determined smile. Soon a war will ravage your world, you filthy monkeys. I declare war on Jujutsu. 17. Night Parade of the 100 Demons. Standing there, he looked at the immense power that Jito Suguru had unleashed upon Shinjuku, clearly intending to further his own plans. Dressed in the uniform his godfather had given him, he looked from side to side, observing with some interest the shamans accompanying him. As Mei had informed him, few shamans were within the 1st grade and special grade. However, those with these ranks were truly powerful, able to fight against curses that could pose a danger to the world of Jujutsu. One of these shamans was none other than his godfather. Gojo Saturo, the very balance between curses and sorcerers who prevented the former from increasing their power excessively. However, Saturo was currently fighting with the followers of Jito Suguru, the former shaman of Tokyo, and accompanied by some of the best shamans, leaving him with the mid-ranking shamans in the fight against the 100 curses that were currently in Shinjuku, watching, waiting to fight. In fact, both sides seemed to be waiting for it, as if they were waiting for some specific signal to act. Taking advantage of this time of peace, he looked at the curses and analyzed them thoroughly. They were not minor 2nd grade curses, and they were terrifyingly powerful. Of the 100, at least 10% were special grade, overflowing with cursed energy so dense that even a sorcerer without a sensitive ability like his could detect them. It seemed that Jito had gone all out to carry out his plans, because even Kyoto was currently attacked at the same time as Shinjuku, so they would be unable to receive support from their comrades on the other side of Japan. He gulped deeply and lowered his shoulders slightly. He trained for this. He'd beaten Jito and killed 2 rogue exorcists. He'd fought hundreds of curses and been Mei-Mei's punching bag for a full year. He studied the Uzumaki and Onmyoji in the school library, learning everything he could about their heritage, and developed his curse technique to a breaking point before creating his own innate area. He just couldn't die there. He wasn't going to do it when Tsumiki was waiting for him. They were meeting the next day, and that was what he was going to do. Kuruma. He clenched his fists. Energy enveloped them, and, following the rest of the sorcerers, he charged into battle, his mind focused solely on the curse that had caused that shout. Taking the form of a truly grotesque crow, immense and muscular, the curse took the form of stone directly into his face. Using his arm at full extension, Naruto unleashed Chi directly onto the curse. It flew out until it crashed into the ground, raising a huge cloud of dust. Brat. Following the scream, he swung his head over his shoulder while in midair. Another curse, this one with 2 muscular arms and a face with only a toothy mouth, appeared within range and grabbed him as hard as a rugby interceptor. He was helpless and slammed straight into the ground. He felt his back twitch slightly and his mouth fill with blood. Oh. Once free, he lifted his body using only his right hand. He moved his left hand under his chin and stared at the curse in front of him. Without even using his sensor, he could tell that the curse was first grade, bordering on special grade. A truly powerful one, if you asked him. The curse seemed to notice his woes. With a loud crack accompanied by a high-pitched screech, the humanoid figure loomed over him, both arms swinging at him. Watching the movement in slow motion, Naruto crossed his arms over his body and took the blow directly, being pushed back several meters and even leaving footprints in the ground. Do you want to play? He wiped the blood running down his chin. Cursed energy enveloped his fists. Then let's play, you bucking bastard. The curse fell upon the sorcerer. Naruto shifted his legs and shifted his weight evenly onto his feet. He braced his stance and waited. He swung his right arm forward, his fist clenched. With narrowed eyes, he waited for the curse to draw near, and when it entered range, he brought his fist down in a powerful motion. Rupture. The sound of the sky breaking stopped all fighting between curses and sorcerers. The humans shifted a little scared and watched as one of their own, a mere first-year sorcerer, was crushing a first-grade curse with his fist directly without much effort. But what was really happening was that Uzumaki Naruto evoked the cursed energy in his fist and, with the force of an earthquake, kept the curse under his fist without breaking a sweat. That boy. Are you seeing it? It's amazing. He slowly raised his striking arm. He took a deep breath, watching the curse struggle to its feet and brought his fist down on the enemy again. With the second blow, the curse finally broke and was completely exorcised, all in front of shamans and other curses watching. He took a deep breath, flexed the fingers of both hands, and clapped his palms together with a deafening clap. A ripple of wind blew the curses back. He took a step. Then a second. He felt eyes on him. He was the center of attention. He moved his hand behind his back and, with deft fingers, took hold of the handle of one of the fragments of his bow staff, while with his left hand he took the other and slowly joined them together, letting everyone hear a completely audible click like the safety of a pistol being released. He spun the staff, creating a sound like steel slicing through the air. Once he had it in the air, he brought it down toward the ground, and a slight earthquake shook the conflict zone, causing both cursors and sorcerers to stagger. He looked at everyone. Shamans and curses alike. He took a deep breath and shrugged slightly. He removed his hand from the staff and left it planted right next to him. Slowly, he brought his hands together, his palms still unclasped. He interlaced his fingers, keeping the index fingers of each hand raised, thus creating the tiger seal. A wave of cursed energy shook Shinjuku. What's he doing? A domain expansion. He's too young. He inhaled. He exhaled. Urmiki Tenkai, territorial expansion like a whisper, that word traveled through the ears of every shaman who could hear it. Slowly, the cursed energy began to form a dark dome over the entire combat zone. Kick, 9. Clap. And, after that simple last word, he joined both palms together, completely forming that characteristic ninjutsu seal. For the next few seconds, nothing happened. Everything remained the same. The shamans watched this, trying to figure out what had happened. Had the first year failed? It was likely. For their part, the curses took this as an opportunity to attack the unsuspecting shamans. However, just as one of the curses moved toward an unsuspecting second-year student, intense bleeding orbs appeared above the dark dome. Oh, look what we have here. Little snacks in the form of mangy curses that I can devour. Thick, the voice came from the darkness accompanied by steam. A steam that seemed to form a fog over the heads of humans and curses alike. What? Slowly, a figure began to appear, completely covering the form of its summoner. When the darkness finally subsided and the shamans and curses could see, many were terrified. Covering the jujutsu student, an immense fox head with blood-red eyes, watched everyone equally, examining. Measuring over 100 meters, the being lashed out with its 9 tails, generating a fierce wind that shattered several windows and buildings alike. Fresh meat to eat. It's been at least a decade since an Uzumaki summoned me. Where's that pesky tomato head? It was fun watching her fight with her effeminate husband. Where are Minato and Kushina, boy? Naruto took a deep breath. He felt his entire body tense, like the cursed energy was escaping from him to keep that being tied to that earthly plane. Sweat dripped down his torso, drop by drop, as if he were standing in the rain. They're dead. HMPF. And who are you, you beardless brat? You Uzumaki and Naruto Su Hiho. As Summoner and Summoner spoke, the curses descended upon the latter with the clear intention of killing him. Before the wide-eyed eyes of veteran and not-so-veteran shamans, the enormous beast slammed its immense paw down upon the heart of curses, destroying them instantly. With a snort, the immense fox glared at the curses and bared its teeth in a predatory grin. I am the Demon King, the Kikbi no Yoko, the representation of all that is evil in the world, of darkness itself. The fox moved his tail slowly, generating a light wind that created a shield impossible for curses to overcome. Do you seriously dare to attack my representative in this world, you disgusting cockroaches? Fine. I will have to show you why curses must submit to demons. Kikbi growled ferociously. It dropped its head again, completely covering its summoner. It slowly opened its enormous snout, and soon the curses and shamans could see a kind of purple energy beginning to emerge from its throat. It was cursed energy in its purest form. That doesn't look good. We should move. Let's get out of here. Ijidama. A sphere was fired toward the center of the curse army. The shamans watched in amazement, then turned to horror when the attack erupted, causing a full-blown earthquake that shook the district. There was no one who did not know about that. Slowly, the smoke dissipated. Where there should have been an army of first and second degree curses, there was now only an immense crater that displayed the raw power of the cursed energy. Crack. Everyone bristled at the snap. Kikbi closed his jaw with a mocking smile, watching in amusement as all those shamans stared at him with true terror. That was his food. Human fear. Humans, whether shamans or sorcerers or not, were always susceptible to fear. Since he was last summoned, a decade ago, no one had seen him again until Kushina and Minato's son invited him to that curse feast. It seemed the boy had learned something from the book and implemented it fully. But to what extent did the boy know about the curse that fell upon the Uzumaki? Did he even know all the possibilities of his curse technique? Those two questions were interesting, and he pondered them for a few seconds, being brought out of his musings by a tired snort. Summoning me places an immense physical and mental burden on you. You're currently carrying over 200 kilos on your shoulders, aren't you, Brad? Kikbi shifted his eyes to his summoner. He watched as beads of sweat fell onto his face, drop by drop, as thick as raindrops in a raging storm. We're done here. I sense no more curses. You may undo your expansion and rest. Letting out a gasp, he separated both hands and undid the tiger seal. As his fingers separated, the immense dome disappeared, and with it the horrendous presence of the Demon King, something that relieved all the sorcerers present. There wasn't a single one who didn't stare at the young student with intense eyes. Naruto ran his arm over his face in a completely futile attempt to remove the remaining sweat from his skin. No matter how hard he tried, the sweat kept pouring down his face. His clothes stuck to his body, and they felt completely damp. But there was no time for that. I had to take Jidosuguru to end this. 18. Resolution. He stared angrily at the lifeless bodies of his classmates, all lying on the ground, as if they were nothing more than mere objects. He gritted his teeth and lightly bit his lower lip in a futile attempt to calm the anger growing inside him. Why, of all the shamans, was he the one who stayed there? Why, of all those who could fight, didn't he? He was relegated to staying in the school, waiting for his fateful end. While Naruto, Gojo-sensei, Inumaki, and Panda fought in Shinjuku, he and Maki were simply left behind, as if they were useless. And finally, the final boss had appeared before them in a perfect movement. He moved his eyes to Maki's unconscious form. Then he looked at Inumaki and Panda, also unconscious. Finally, he looked at the upright and powerful figure of Jidosuguru. The man stood right in the middle of his companions, his arms crossed, each hand tucked into the sleeve of the other's arm. A smug smile played on his lips as he looked at him, as if no one could stop him, as if no one could defeat him now. And, in a way, he was completely right. He, Akatsuki, didn't have full access to the power of his curse. Rika. While she was known as the Queen of Curses, he hadn't been a shaman until a few months ago, leaving him completely terrified when someone was hurt by his dead partner. Therefore, he couldn't access the full power of his curse technique until he could untangle all the knots, or so Gojo Satoru told him after he joined. He gripped his sword tightly. Maki had given him that sword when they started training. The same Maki who was now lying on the ground, blood running down her chin, completely out of the game. He pushed aside thoughts of Rika. He couldn't think about her now. He hadn't been able to fully control the power of his curse, but he had to do something to stop that man who was staring at him with insane amusement. Well, Yuta. I can't wait all this time just for you to decide to do something you should have done a long time ago, Jito said, infusing his voice with power. He knew he wasn't someone like Gojo. But that was something Akatsuki was completely unaware of. He wouldn't be like Gojo, but he had achieved power in his own right. Make up your mind, kid. Give me Rika, and your friends won't suffer anymore because of your cowardice and lack of judgment. He felt those words enter his mind and begin to play on repeat. Hand over Rika. Give him Rika. That guy. He gripped the katana tightly in his hand and looked at Jito Suguru's feet. Inuyamaki, Panda, and Maki were completely unconscious, with minor injuries and breathing. All three were still alive, and that partially calmed him. None of them had died, but they did suffer some injuries. Akatsuki, Jito put his calmness aside. He looked at the boy for a few seconds before sighing and drawing a delicate smile on his thin lips. Give me Rika and no one else will suffer, he pointed at the curses that accompanied him. No one. Wish. Swiftly, a projectile sped through the air in a second and embedded itself in the ground, right between Jito and Akatsuki. A metal staff had been driven through the head of a curse and was holding it in place. Yuta's eyes widened when he realized whose staff it was. Loss. Footsteps sounded behind Jito. Both Jito and Akatsuki looked toward the person interrupting their conversation. Yuta opened his eyes and felt a calmness spread throughout his body, while Jito narrowed his eyes and pressed his lips together, holding back the rising anger within him. I don't like it when my friends get hurt, man. Naruto. Without a jacket. Showing an athletic torso, with small scars running across it. Uzumaki Naruto walked in with slow, sure steps. His eyes, slightly covered by his golden hair, were hostile, with a dangerous gleam. You showed up at the end, kid, Jito smiled tensely. That means you've escaped my 100 Demons Night Parade. Oh? Naruto stuck his pinky finger in his right ear. What? Did you say something? Disrespectful brat. Naruto twisted his lips into a mocking smile. I never run away from a fight, old man, he retorted. He clenched his right hand tightly and made a punching motion against the air. A white cobweb appeared under his fist, as if the sky itself were made of glass. You'll run away from me. That's something I'd like to see. Keshin Tamamo no Mei, incarnation of Tamamo no Mei. The Uzumaki stared at the curse that appeared in front of him, exactly 3 meters away. It wasn't grotesque like the strange crow or muscular like the first-rate curse he'd fought. This one was far more powerful, evident just by its presence. With black hair, 4 eyes and a kimono-like outfit, Tamamo no Mio waited for her master's instructions, or so Naruto could see, standing a few meters from the curse. What? Is that all you? Tamamo? Naruto opened his eyes. He raised his left arm and shielded his face from a direct hit from the flame. Feeling his legs and body being pushed backward, the sorcerer could only watch as he was sent crashing into the wall. Naruto-san. Erase Jutsu Uzumaki, extreme curse manipulation. Whirlpool. Yuta halted his steps, his hand on the handle of his sword. With wide eyes, he watched as a huge whirlpool began to form behind Jito. Curse after curse, all those stored by the man, were swallowed up in that spiral of cursed energy. Erg. And a truck that ran over me. Naruto stood up from the rubble. When he focused his vision, he saw Rika behind Yuta. Summoner and Curse were fighting giant babies. And a spiral was behind Jito. Hold on. Arg. It took me a little longer to get up. Using my territorial extension was too much of a chore. He cracked his bones with a movement. He clenched his right hand again, infusing it with cursed energy. It, which normally took on a yellow-orange color, now took on the hazy white color it acquired when he used too much energy. Bucket. Zash crack. Naruto shattered the ground with a direct hit. For a few seconds, nothing happened, leaving him looking completely insane. After a few seconds, Jito and Akatsuki felt a massive shockwave that made them move across the ground. Yuta leaped toward one of the adjacent buildings, taking the rest of the first years with him. Jito Suguru moved toward the other building, sending a few curses at the Uzumaki. Can he manipulate cursed energy to that level? Jito narrowed his eyes at Kushina and Minato's son. He had met both parents during his time as a student at the school and as a shaman under the elders in charge of Jujutsu. The only curse that seemed to be linked to the boys was his mother's. Jajankin. Paper. Naruto stretched his arm toward the curses. He concentrated cursed energy in his hand and, stomping hard, fired a wave of energy at his enemies. They were soon overwhelmed with a blast of cursed energy that completely swept them away. Tamamo. Not again. She charged energy into her left fist and punched the air with it. A shockwave generated right above the special grade curse's face. Tamamo was thrown back and slammed into the wall. It's my turn now. Jito let a sigh escape his lips. Had it all had to come to this? To a crossroads. He knew that Rika, the Queen of Curses, possessed infinite cursed energy. It had been obvious when the cursed boy had used the device that replicated the Inumaki's use of the curse against him. And that made him desire Rika even more than before. But did he also have to deal with the last Uzumaki, the remnant of Kushina and Minato? "It doesn't matter," he murmured. Yuta and Naruto looked at him, he felt their eyes boring into him. He ran his hand through his hair and looked at the two teens with eyes full of excitement. He couldn't wait to take Rika in his own hands. "It doesn't matter. No matter what you do, Uzumaki boy. I'll take what I desire in my own hands no matter how much you oppose it, son of Kushina and Minato." "Oh?" Naruto placed a bow staff on his shoulder, raising one of his eyebrows at those words. "Sorry, I don't speak Taka. Jito shook his head. Filthy monkeys. No one seemed to understand him, and that didn't matter much to him. Soon the world would be the way he'd been wishing for years. He snapped his fingers, and his movement finally began. With Uzumaki, his technique, he would erase everything in that combat zone. Naruto stopped in his tracks. He stared at the enormous mass behind Jito. Was that an attack? Or a giant curse? He tightened his grip on his bow staff and waited, prayed for a miracle. He didn't have a power at the moment capable of dealing with something like that. He couldn't even use his territorial expansion momentarily. Yuta. Tiamo. Naruto and Jito stared in amazement at the new form of Rika, the Queen of Curses. If she had been powerful before, now her power had increased immeasurably, surpassing all imaginable limits. Could it be because of her infinite energy? Naruto wouldn't dwell on it. He slid his lips into a somewhat tired smile and summoned cursed energy once more. Earth. Uzumaki and Akatsuki exchanged glances. Naruto saw the determination in his partner's eyes and clenched his left hand tightly. More cursed energy appeared. "This is wonderful. Two young men willing to give their all to stop me. It's something monkeys would do." Jito raised his arms. His dark eyes looked at both Naruto and Yuta. "Two exceptional curses are with Yao and I will take them." Jazz. Naruto shifted his weight. He twisted his torso back slightly and stretched both arms forward shortly after, generating a massive shockwave against Jito's movement. Yuta took a deep breath. Behind him, Rika roared loudly, feeling Yuta's words within herself. Sorcerer and Curse took Jito's move with full force, being swallowed up by the Uzumaki technique. The three collided. Jito Suguru wanted Rika. Akatsuki Yuta wanted to kill Jito. And Uzumaki Naruto was unwilling to let someone like Jito conjure the world into a state where Tsumiki would suffer. Brahm. A dense thick whitish cloud of dust and debris covered the battle zone. Tremors shook the entire school. Cracks appeared in buildings, chunks of them falling to the ground and crushing plants. Trees fell to the ground. Oh. Naruto brushed aside the debris in his path with his hand. He watched with his cerulean eyes the destruction of his movement alongside Jito and Yuta's. Where was Yuta anyway? He walked with his hands exposed, showing the fresh blood dripping from them, leaving a trail of blood. Yuta. Using both hands as a loudspeaker, he called out to his partner loudly, hoping for a response. He took a breath as he stopped. He felt like his body needed complete rest. Uzumaki is an Onmyoji clan that was cursed by a demon, more specifically the king of demons. The Kikbi no Yoko, the immense nine-tailed fox. It was because of him that, for generations, the Uzumaki were able to be sorcerers, shamans and exorcists, always more aware of the cursed energy around them, and that was called the cursed technique. Cursed union. It was not a union as such, but rather a manipulation. But since the Uzumaki saw, felt and were united to the supernatural world by Kikbi, they ended up being able to manipulate the cursed energy very easily. That's why my mother was able to use the Konfsai adamantine chains, which are a complete materialization of the cursed energy. Our curse, our technique, allows us to materialize the cursed energy as we wish, and we can use it for an infinite number of things. However, it is not the same with the expansion. Because of the contract, because of the curse, we can only use one type of expansion, which summons the Kikbi itself to this plane of the world. And using it at such a young age wore down my body. Fighting Jito wasn't a good decision either. He finally stopped in his tracks. He smiled slightly as he took in the scene. In front of him were all his first-year classmates. Inumaki, Maki, Panda and Yuta, though the latter was hugging a girl. That was strange for him, but he'd get to the story later anyway. It was time for a long vacation. Epilogue. She leaned her back against the bedroom door. She buried her face in her hands and simply let out a frustrated cry as the others stared at her. She didn't care. It didn't bother her. Was she even thinking about them? No. She let out the pent-up anger and frustration in that heartbreaking cry, while thick tears streamed down her cheeks. Why did this have to happen to her of all people? Why her? She was the kindest person in the world. If he was kind to a degree, then she was kindness personified. She was always there for him. She listened to him. She supported him. She waited for him. She did everything for him, and he did everything for her, and yet, the world she couldn't be in finally touched her, devouring her until it tore her away. He didn't react when a hand fell on his shoulder in a comforting gesture. He didn't want comforting gestures or emotional support. Did he need it? Probably. Did he want it? No, he didn't want someone supporting him now. He just wanted her to return to the world of the living, to wake up. He had sworn to be with her and be her everything, but all of that simply vanished like smoke after the defeat of Jito Suguru, that deranged bastard who had wreaked havoc in Shinjuku and Kyoto. He hated that man with all the fervor of his soul. Why did her world have to touch her? He and his brother secretly promised each other not to make her suffer, or for them, or for the world of Jujutsu, and, like a bad joke, the world of Jujutsu simply didn't listen and took her in its cold claws, tearing her away from them without mercy. What had they done wrong? Did she deserve this? Was it because of her arrogant actions against Jito? If so, he would gladly give his life so she could breathe again. But of course, God didn't exist, and justice was as fleeting as the mist on a winter morning. She would remain bedridden despite all the sorcerers who passed by her trying to exorcise her, and he and his brother would be condemned to think about her and hope for her full recovery. I hated Jujutsu. She's in shock, one of the nurses said. The man next to the boy looked at the nurse. With a gesture, he dismissed her, and a few seconds later, the sound of the door closing was the only thing that disturbed the room. Gojo Satoru then looked up. Lying on the only bed in that room, Fushiguro Tsumiki was resting with her eyes closed, completely in a coma caused by a strange curse. Or so he deduced. It seemed that Jito's cursed energy had caused this. But why only Tsumiki? He didn't know if other young people had been cursed by the clash between Jito and his students. How is Naruto? Satoru came to. He shook his head and looked at Fushiguro standing there, hands in the pockets of his pants and school uniform. Megumi seemed to take her sister's condition better almost. Fushiguro was a boy who didn't cry openly in front of everyone, and that was something he, as an adult, knew how to appreciate. The boy cried for his sister in his room at the Gojo mansion and didn't leave it for several days. He's processing it, Satoru murmured slowly. He looked at his godson and removed his hand from the boy's shoulder. How are you? That question would have sounded like a bad joke if it hadn't come from Gojo Satoru. Fushiguro took a few deep breaths and gave his sister's boyfriend a calm look before looking back at his teacher. I'm ready, he said as a simple response. Satoru slumped his shoulders. The boy was due to enter the world of Jujutsu in a few months, right when he turned 15. He had to do so because of the contract he'd made to keep Megumi away from the Zenin, as his father had intended. Good, the man looked at his godson. Fushiguro. Let's leave Naruto alone for a while. Good. Sitting down, he heard them both leave the room, closing the door behind them. He sniffed softly and began to stand. Red, swollen eyes became apparent as he withdrew his face from her arms. The sorcerer who had defeated nearly 100 curses, who had helped defeat Jito Suguru was crying over a woman. He stopped at Tsumiki's bedside. He looked at her with bright but determined eyes. He slowly took the girl's hand in his own and leaned over the teenager, delicately placing a chaste kiss on her lips. Her lips still tasted like cherry. Tsumiki, he murmured. Naruto ran his hand through the girl's hair, brushing the brown strands away from her face. I'm going to heal you. I'm going to figure out how to undo this curse and get you out of this state. His voice sounded stifled. He swallowed hard and regained some composure. I'll take care of Megumi and Satoru. You know that without you, those two won't survive much longer. Do you know that Satoru ordered pizza yesterday because he wasn't too lazy to cook? Or that Megumi got into another fight? Your brother just can't stop, he's truly a nervous wreck now. He twisted his lips into a smile. But he cares about you. He finally accepted his position as a sorcerer at the Tokyo school. He's going to be my sweet kohai for 4 years and he'll grow up under Satura's training and under my watchful eye. I know I've never been good at this Jujutsu thing, not at least without the help of Mei-sensei or Satoru. If it weren't for them and the library where I gained some knowledge of my clan, I wouldn't have been able to stop the war and help defeat Jito Suguru. He took a deep breath. The sides of his nostrils flared as he inhaled sharply. I owe it all to them and to you. Naruto caressed Tsumiki's cheek, feeling the softness of her skin beneath his touch. If you hadn't been with me all along, he remembered how they talked on the phone, how they texted each other, how they made video calls and normal calls during his training, after it, when he arrived at school in Tokyo. I probably wouldn't have gotten here, to where I am now. He stood up completely straight. Using his right arm, he wiped his face of any trace of tears. And now it's my turn to return the favor. I will give you back everything you have done for me, even if it reduces my soul to nothing but ashes. Additional data. Name: Uzumaki Naruto. Clan: Uzumaki. Curse technique: Cursed union, users can feel and are linked to cursed energy to a point that no other shaman could be, being able to manifest said energy and even solidify it, as in the case of Kushina's adamantine chains. Age: 15 to 16. Grade: Style: Naruto's combat and exorcism style is using the martial arts that he perfected under the tutelage of Mei, whom he calls Mei-sensei. Motivation: Initially, his motivation for becoming a shaman was Tsumiki herself, his desire to protect her. Currently, his motivation is unknown. Wish: Her wish was to protect her loved ones, a wish that changed with Tsumiki's coma and, for the moment, is unknown. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown in left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.